Everyone, give you a few minutes to get settled in, and then we will do introductions and get started. As you can see, have a couple guests here, Kyle and Chris, and we'll give official, legitimate introductions here in a moment. Interesting. Has anyone seen or heard from Tom Homan the last 9 months? I mean, there's been some stories, right? I haven't seen anything official.
Yeah, I've heard people who are in his that are friendly with him that have been talking to him. He's obviously still around in the world, but I think he's keeping a low profile. Probably smart.
And if you're watching NFL, you can go back and watch it later.
Well, the Broncos just threw an interception to somebody, so it looks like it's over. It looks like New England's going to take it. So,
a lot of people saying, "Hey, Kyle," they recognize you.
Yeah, we sent it out to the to our locals, or I sent it out to my locals, so we got a good Rumble following, and I reshared it on there. So if you guys are on Rumble, make sure you guys subscribe over here too. It's easy to do.
And vice versa. If you guys are over here and you're not subscribed to Kyle Seraphin, make sure you go check him out on X, Rumble, Locals, and YouTube.
All over the place.
Everywhere.
I'll tell you what, guys, I was having a pretty nice snowpocalypse day. We don't really get a lot of winter weather, so I was enjoying the fact that my entire street is iced over all the way out to the highway and there's nowhere to go anywhere. I've just been hanging out with my kids who have been proving that they are not good at walking on ice, like all kids. I've had 2-year-old hit the dust, a 4-year-old hit the dust, 7 and 8-year-olds. Everybody's ended up on their butts. It's pretty fun.
When you guys get closer to 50, then you start ending up on your butt again.
I was real close. I had a couple of moments.
With my dog the other day and hit some black ice and whoop right up.
Yeah, it's sneaky. I've actually got a ring cam of my wife hitting some very, very clear ice on our very light covered concrete porch, and I watched her slide. And of course, I got the audio to go with it too, which is like, that kind of thing.
Nice.
And then when she came in, she goes, "Were you watching me?" I go, "No. Should there be something I should look at?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Let me check the replay here. Let's go get this. Let's get it going back and forth."
Those replays are awesome with stuff like that.
Yeah, good times. She's like, "I hate these cameras."
Slow motion.
That's it.
All right. Well, we got a few people in here. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll do my little intro here, and then we'll jump into what we're going to do today. Welcome to our live stream. Quick announcements. Make sure if you want to be subscribed to this channel and many channels, make sure that you actually make sure that you are, because YouTube has been unsubscribing people randomly without people knowing. Many of you have actually told me when I reminded people about it, like probably 50% of you were not subscribed that thought you were. Also, there is a Discord that I've created, and it has private voice and forum channels for YouTube and Patreon members. And it should be pretty fun. There's already some people building up in there. And then, of course, check your perks on the channel page, and that's where you'll see it. Now we're going to break down the recent high-profile encounters in Minneapolis, and it's very controversial. We understand that. Today, we're analyzing the Renee Good and the Alex Pretti footages to critique officer tactics and real-world scenarios. And, of course, viewer discretion is advised, but I will tell you that there's no real blood or gore. So it's really just, kind of breaking down what each person's doing, where they're moving, and you will hear gunshots, but there's nothing gory to worry about. So that's good. And with me to provide expert insights is Chris LaPorte. He has 18 years of SWAT experience, and he's also a senior instructor training manager. And then, of course, Kyle Seraphin. He's an ex-FBI agent and host of the Kyle Seraphin Show. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're reviewing these incidents to learn from them, not to assign blame. Okay, so this is not like a, this side's wrong and this side's right. We're gonna look at the facts, and based on the facts, that's what everyone's going to share their opinion on. If you disagree, that's completely fine. Just make sure you're being civil. Okay, and to keep this genuine and real, this is my first time meeting Kyle. Okay, and then also none of us have discussed our opinions on any of these shootings yet, so this would be completely raw. And then other than that, we're just going to start jumping into it. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Obviously, super chats get, bumped to the top and that kind of stuff. But I try to pull a little bit from every level. And what we'll start with here is if you want to do quick introductions, if you want to add a little bit more, I guess we can start with Kyle.
Yeah, easy. So, as you said, I used to be an FBI agent. I did 6 years with the FBI. I was a federal whistleblower, brought forward a bunch of malfeasance under the Biden administration, but it wasn't specifically political. It was violations of rule, policy, or law, which we're told are protected disclosures. Before that, I was a paramedic. I did some time in a high volume emergency room in North Austin, and I rode on ambulances. Prior to that, I did one stint in the Air Force. I did a single enlistment where I was also a medic. So, got experience on the emergency medical side. I've done it on the federal law enforcement side. Obviously, I've worked with a lot of locals, but I don't have any experience with local use of force. And it's a little different animal when you guys get into the federal world.
All right, and Chris?
I started law enforcement back in '97 in Colorado. Did 23 years on the street. 18 of those I was on a SWAT team. When I left the team, I was the assistant team commander. I did a lot of defensive tactics training, department's instructor for that, and a lot of firearms instruction. Came out to Nebraska in 2020. I pretty much went into training at that point. I've just been training for the last 5 years, and we train citizens, but we also have a law enforcement division. So we train a lot of law enforcement, federal agents, U.S. Marshals, things like that. So that's kind of
all right. Awesome. So what we will do is we'll get started on, I want to start with some stats. I think it's always interesting to start with stats. So based on this, obviously this is some AI, some manual, so it might not be perfect, but it's pretty dang close. So this is ICE stats, okay? So custody deaths. During Bush Jr., 2003 to 2009, there were 91 reported deaths, and there are 32 in just 2004. Now, the cause of death can vary. In some cases, it's their, maybe they had like a heart attack while they're being detained or something similar. It could be a shooting. It could be, they get sick. They got COVID-19 or something, right? There's a lot of different reasons. And then under Obama, we have 56 reported, and that's over his entire 2 years, or sorry, his two terms. And then we have Trump, his first term, 41 reported, and Biden had 19. 19 seems really low compared to the other ones. So I'm not sure if that was underreporting, if there were less people active, because obviously they had open borders and that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure exactly why that's significantly lower.
I can probably tell you on that one.
Go for it.
Yeah, these guys were kept from doing their jobs during that time. So a lot of folks that were in the ICE world, they were on a stand down. They were only allowed to go after kind of the worst of the worst, and they had to actually pitch it to command to be able to get it up the chain. So we saw a lot less there. There were incidental encounters that people, couldn't help but take into custody. So you did have some of those, and there were obviously a few ERO operations going on, but it was a significantly lower ops tempo that was happening under the Biden administration.
Makes sense. If you go back even a little bit further, like when I was kind of involved in a lot of that in the 90s and like early 2000s, it was kind of similar. Like they kind of shut us off ICE like completely. Like you guys can't work with them. Like if they come to the jail, we're not giving them information. So there's been a lot of that back and forth. It always depends on who's in charge of, other pieces as to whether or not we work well with them. And you can see like those latter years, I had the same thing. I remember Bush Jr. being in, and we were just deporting people like crazy during that. So again, it's going to stem a lot of politics stem off of that.
Now they're saying for Trump so far, just in, let's see, I guess 2025 to September 20. So basically the first, 9 months, there were 17 and 31 to 32 total for 2025. So they're saying that's one of the deadliest years, but there was also 32 in 2004 with Bush Jr., right? So it's not excessively different than the previous ones. Now, as far as field fatalities, this is actual shootings, right? Like we're talking about today. Bush Jr., there's no data. Obama, there's no data. So I'm not sure why. Maybe they categorize stuff differently then. But for Trump, since 2025 in January, there's been 27 related shootings. That is not deaths, that's shootings. There's been 7 deaths and 5 involved ICE. Okay. So when you hear that there were 27 immigration related shootings, that doesn't mean ICE is doing all of it. So I just want to make sure that that's put out there. And then for Biden, 21 through 24, there were 11 pursuits with gunfire. And of those, there were 4 to 7 fatalities. So that's 7 max and then 7 from Trump. So obviously Biden's was over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Are these, what are these numbers coming from? Are these DHS, all of it? So yes. Is that going to be your CBP, if there is such a thing as a shooting there, and then your BP and your ICE and everything else?
Yeah.
HSI. Okay.
Yep. And this was the best I could find. There might be other sources that I'm not aware of.
Sure. Yeah, for people's awareness too, feds tend to be really good about keeping it dialed down, so you don't really hear as much about federal shootings. They happen. They get notified internally. There's always an internal email, but oftentimes we'll find out about it from somebody sharing a local news story in one of the group chats. It just is not something that is talked about in the same way that they happen in other agencies. And it's a cultural thing, and it's also kind of that classic like stifling, because it's bad publicity for the feds.
For sure. Now, I want to talk about employment. So there are 22,000 officers or agents. That's double from the start of 2025. So that's extremely aggressive recruitment. And as far as officer deaths, there's only been 2 since 2003, and they were murders. There's been other deaths, but they were from COVID-19 and other related illnesses. Salary range. This is interesting. So the average salary is $60,000 to $120,000 annually. That also can include a $50,000 signing bonus, which I believe they're pushing really hard right now. They're trying to get a lot of people in, but 51,000 on the low end. So I don't know about the average family, but 51,000 for most households is not going to cut it in this economy. Yeah. That's pretty rough. And then recruitment looks like it's through USA Jobs. No formal education required. They have to do a background check. Takes about 3 months. Drug screen, physical exam, all that stuff. Oral interview, and then there's no age limit to encourage participation. And then I wanted to compare that to regular police officers. So we have deportation officers. I know a lot of people were talking about they only get, I think what someone said, 16 weeks of training or something similar. So I wanted to pull this up and actually get some real numbers. So it's 6 to 7 weeks for ERO deportation officers, and it was previously 21 weeks. So that's a huge difference, right? It's a third of the time. But for special agents, it's 27 weeks. And then that's 12 weeks general and 15 specialized. For standard officers, we're looking at 21 weeks in police academy, and that's anywhere from 12 to 27, depending on agency. And then for like NYPD, LAPD, they do 26 weeks. Okay. So they're similar, right? About 27 weeks. So there's not a huge difference. The difference is, based on what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you guys, that's why I brought you on. If someone goes through this training, are they immediately put out in the field? Do they have to go through some kind of like field training first for a certain period of time before they can get like officially activated? Or how does that work?
So for feds, typically you've got a 1-year probation if you're prior military. You have a 2-year probation if you are a non-military veteran. That's just standard across the board for federal government employees. And in the case of things like law enforcement, FBI specifically, they do an 18-month. It's basically until your 2-year mark, you're on probation, but there's about an 18-month, what they call logbook. So unlike an FTO where there's somebody who's overseeing you, there is a training agent, but you're on your own independently. And I don't know whether it's because there's an age differential for your average recruit or whether they think because you have a college degree, you know how to do things in the world. That's generally not the case in my experience. People oftentimes come out there and have absolutely no idea what to do, but they do have a list of experiences. So the Bureau does this logbook thing where you have to participate in 5 arrests. You get it signed off on each time, and then you're cleared on like, I've done arrests. You got to go and do 5 surveillances. You got to go do this. You got to be participating in a Title III warrant. So there's all these little different experiences that they want you to check off. That's the way the Bureau does it. HSI's got a slightly different animal. BP does it a little bit differently. Those guys out there are doing a different, patrol mission. So each of these are a little bit different on that. I also wanted to point out the salaries. If people want to check it out, you can look up the GS pay scale 2026. The opening pay, all of those numbers they always cite, especially the AI stuff, they're always 25% lower than what they actually get paid. So they don't pay overtime for most federal agents. They do get what's called LEAP, law enforcement availability pay. So it's a 25% premium on whatever the base pay is. And then there's also locality pay. So if you live in a more expensive area, you may get a lot more money, sometimes $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year more, depending on where you're living. San Francisco, New York, DC does it, Miami, Houston for some reason. But anyway, the starting pay is probably 75 or 63 is the opening pay is what I was seeing. And then it goes up to about 140,000 for the GS13 when they max. So just it's not quite as bad as it looks, just so you know who they're recruiting.
Okay. And then so for Chris, for you, especially with SWAT and that kind of stuff, how long is the training for that up front?
Well, we talk about it's going to depend on the department, especially if you're just going out on the street. Like most departments are running some sort of field training program where you're going to be in several different stages with different officers, and they kind of run you through the gamut. We did the kind of San Jose model, and you had 3 different phases. Then your final phase was with an officer that was in plain clothes, and you're pretty much on your own. That depends on the department. Like smaller departments sometimes don't do that. Also depends on your prior history. Like the last department that I was on, I switched from the sheriff's office and I went to a PD in the same area, but I'd already had 18, 19, almost 20 years at that point. So they were like, we're going to have you run around with the sergeant a little bit and just make sure you're where you need to be. And I was with him for like 2-3 weeks. They put me in with the lieutenant the last week of that. Then they sent me out, but I already knew where I was at there. However, I go back to when I was a rookie, when I first came out of the academy. The first place I worked for was a very small department, and they had 4 people, I think, that were on. And back then in Colorado, it was called a marshal's office because it was less than, a certain amount of people in town. I think it was less than 1,000 or 1,500 or something like that. So I spent like a week and a half with the chief of police at that point, and then they stuck me with another officer for like 2 weeks, and they handed me keys and a ticket book and sent me on my way. Of course, I was 21 and feeling like I was going to go save the world, but I was in a complete loss. I'm lucky I didn't die probably 20 times, so not having a good like field training program is really detrimental to how that officer can kind of work through things and decide things. Like to me, that was a big piece when I went to the next department, that I helped them kind of implement a better FTO program. And I really didn't work a lot with the federal guys that were new. Almost all of our DA, ATF, FBI guys that we dealt with were pretty seasoned. I didn't deal a lot with anybody that was real new. So again, most of our guys had already been on the road for quite a while. So I don't know how most of their programs work.
So it sounds like they would mix people in. So basically all different levels. If you have 10 officers, you have a couple people that have no idea what they're doing, and you have a couple that are seasoned. I'm sure that's probably similar with ICE. But
yeah, and ICE been going through kind of an issue with the hiring there. They have, they're obviously aggressively recruiting, as you pointed out. So you've got the $50,000 bonus. Some people are getting a little bit less. If they have some experience, they're giving them less if they already have a federal pension and so on. They're trying to get people out there, but their issue, the bottleneck happens at the academies. So they go to what's called FLETC. It's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. There's a couple of different options. They go to Glencoe, Georgia, or they go out to Artesia in New Mexico. So these guys are trying to get through, but a lot of these guys are getting hired on, and then they're just sitting around in the office. And I have current and former feds that talk to me about that, where they're hired on, but they're not trained, so they don't have a skill set. They haven't gotten badge and gun. They're not getting credentials issued to them, so they're literally just sitting around, just like surfing the web and watching what's happening on X. So some of those numbers are a little bit they're a little bit inflated, and they're also drawing from other federal agencies. So almost all of these task force that have ICE on them are either bringing on other Border Patrol guys, some from HSI, which is a different animal altogether. You're getting some FBI, some DEA, some ATF guys. And by and large, from what my boys were telling me, I just had a buddy who was just out there in Minneapolis coming out of the Wisconsin office. And he said that they did a kind of a roll call in the morning. And of the 10 guys that were there, 7 of them were prior cops. And, the other 2 had prior law enforcement. There was only one person that was there for the adventure and was a, Fed only experience. So you are getting a mixed bag of experience, but a lot of these guys have had time on the street. They've done patrol. They've done an FTO with a real department somewhere. And then they've also worked as a federal agent. The ERO mission is not that complicated. It's an organized operation. It's find a guy, quick surveillance, identify where they are. And these are just kind of like snatch and grabs. It's only getting ugly because we'll talk about it more, I'm sure. But I think the issue is that we don't have the standard thing you see on a federal operation, which I've never done a Fed op and not had 1 or 2 uniformed black and whites with us to do some crowd control and some traffic control. And that's pretty standard.
I would agree with that too.
You just get the standoff. It doesn't mean you have to agree with the mission set. They oftentimes, the local guys that I worked with were not read in on what we were doing. We'd give them a brief if they wanted it, if it was necessary to what they were, their role. But holding a perimeter where people weren't driving through a federal operation for their own safety, for the safety of the public, it's really common. And it gives some legitimacy to, you're dealing with guys that are dressed like me. They're rolling in plain clothes. They're wearing flannels or hoodies or whatever the heck it is that feds wear, because we wear all kinds of stuff. We got plate carriers that may say what we're doing, but being able to look out there and see a uniformed guy in a black and white with the lights on that they recognize from their town or their county, it's a really big deal. And we would lean on that heavily for legitimacy, so they understood what was happening, and also for the neighbors. I mean, this is a community involved thing when you go out there and you serve a warrant, or if you're doing an admin grab on somebody who needs to be deported. you want the community to understand, like, this is not just some random dudes who popped up and are doing some sort of like wild, CIA rendition.
Yeah, I saw something that Waltz is trying to, he's trying to do his thing. We'll get into that, like you said. So just really quick, just to like put a button on this. So education for ICE specifically, they prefer bachelor's, but you can also have equivalent experience. So if you're ex-military or ex-police officer or something like that, they'll take that. Law enforcement officer, high school GED minimum, higher degrees increasingly preferred. Age, both, minimum's 21. It looks like ICE says up to 37. You know anything? Okay. So
I went into my academy at either 35 or 36. I think it was 36. Right on the edge of the top end for the federal recruitment. There are some exceptions with certain relevant experience that they'll take people on, and that kind of screws with it. It's more about the retirement, the retirement, because there's a mandatory retirement at 55. So they're trying to play within that game, and then you can get a couple of different extensions. But for some reason, federal government doesn't want people over 60 doing law enforcement. So that's where it kind of comes in. You can imagine. And a lot of people are starting later. So people will come in, they'll have, law enforcement experience. They'll try to come into the federal system, whatever agency they want to do. Same thing. They'll go to law school. They'll go work in there. They'll be a part of a DA's office. Then they'll go and they'll apply for FBI or ATF or DEA, that kind of thing. So you're seeing a different kind of, the feeder programs are different. People are linguists. People come in with, software experience. And so they like that. They got people who are accountants and so on. It's just a different kind of recruiting pool.
Yeah, it's not just people on the street, as opposed to how most people think it is.
As much that's what you're hearing too. By the way, you're hearing this messaging. Yeah. These guys are untrained. They're completely wild. It's like these people are generally speaking, they're decently vetted.
Yeah. So physical fitness, they have to pass tests just like anything else. Their tests are, they're not terrible. I don't think the average person who sits around and watches TV all day could pass their tests, but they're not extreme athletes or anything like that. Medical checks, standard. They have to do polygraph. Training content. So ICE, immigration law, detention, Spanish ERO, firearms, arrests. For law enforcement officer, criminal law, policing, de-escalation, vehicles, both require passing exams. And post-training, they both have probationary periods in the field and refreshers of service break. I don't know if that has changed with the push to get more of them out quicker, but it sounds like that's their preference. And then key comparisons, ICE is more specialized for immigration, and both emphasize ethics and fitness, but ICE's shorter training may reduce depth. And that can include things like de-escalation, right? Yeah, so anyway, so the whole point of these videos is they show them going through all this training, and then it gets to the point where, like in this one here, it shows them doing, different drills, running through houses, training in vehicles. And then they have their firing line, obviously, and they're doing their training, and they just kind of call stuff out, like 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, go, right, and stuff like that. So they're trying to like get them to be reactive to certain situations, and basically trying to train them for what they might face in the street. One thing I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, but they spend a lot of time shooting, and then they spend less time doing like de-escalation training and stuff like that. Is there any truth to that? Is that how it was when you guys trained as well, or did you do equal?
Yeah, so on my end, we never did any de-escalation training at all. I never saw that in the federal academy, and that may be because of the targeted type missions. We're not doing patrols. You can hear me still, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I may have solved this echo problem. I'm hopeful because I just swapped the channels. So I never did anything to the effect of a de-escalation, and that's something I'm seeing. Whether they do that more on the ICE side, which is certainly possible, they don't do chance encounters as a general rule of thumb. And that's what the difference between local and federal really comes down to for people to understand. Policing is a very different animal than like the investigative agencies. And policing is community oriented, and it's out there in the street, and they pull over a car and they have no idea who's in there. And it could be anybody that either owns a car or doesn't own the car. When feds go after people, generally speaking, they've been surveilling, they've been watching this for a while. Some of these cases will go for years and years where they've been, building up the entire known associates and the entire web of whoever's involved. So when they roll in, there's a brief on who's the girlfriend, who's the mom, who's this and that. It's a lot more like the targeted stuff you'd see in a SWAT mission or a SWAT hit, where everybody who's been kind of known, it's not a hasty op and it's not like a chance encounter. So when it comes to whether or not there's a de-escalation, there's a use of force and when you can use it, but federal tends to focus a lot more, in my experience, on deadly force, because if you're walking around in plain clothes, you're not wearing a duty belt. Most people are not screwing around with carrying like OC. They're not rolling with a baton. Maybe they are on a plate carrier. I used to carry one because I wanted an option, but it's a little bit less of that. It's more about threat of compliance, and then deadly force is something you see people go to, which is I think what we're going to end up seeing in both of these scenarios.
Let's see, on my end, local wise, like we had a little bit of, de-escalation training in the academy, but it kind of continued throughout the career. And then like we did some more advanced stuff. Like we all got CIT trained and did all the rest of that. And then there was some more specific stuff when it came to our SWAT stuff as well. Like, we had negotiators, and some of us, like the team leaders, would go to negotiation schools as well, so that we kind of knew, like, in between these things, like, we're able to kind of work with the negotiators instead of them going, hey, we're going to do this. We needed to understand, from their side, but they also needed to understand from our side. So we tried to cross train them too. I don't know, like, that's the thing, is I don't know how much these guys are getting, but I'm guessing not a lot. And that's kind of my worry too. When I start seeing these, I start seeing like the big groups, and you can tell the guys that have had some training that are a little bit more together and they have a little bit better control. And then I see some where it might be some guys that are kind of spotty, and they could have, guys from a couple different areas or groups that don't work together a lot, or they could have just guys that are a little less trained that are just not quite sure how to kind of de-escalate and do a little bit of crowd control. And they might be kind of shooting from the hip a little bit, excuse my pun there, but that's really kind of what I start to see too, is kind of the lack of consistency with their crowd control and their techniques, unless there's some, big groups there. And also if there's some local guys involved, you start seeing a little bit more of that come together.
What I know in my experience too, a lot of people I've seen when they train, the de-escalation training is very like you against one attacker or something. It's not like a group of 8 guys or 10 guys trying to de-escalate with one shooter. You know what I mean? So like the situation we saw with Alex Pretti, you don't see a lot of de-escalation training in that type of setting. So like if it's just one person against one shooter, they're saying, hey, don't reach for your gun, and hey, put it down, take it slow, that kind of stuff. That doesn't work if you have 8 different officers all doing their own individual thing and they're not synchronized or communicating.
Yeah, and it looks pretty hectic during that too.
It makes you wonder how there's no telling how long these teams have been put together as well. I mean, some of these guys may have been out on, this might be their first op working together, or they're working in the same area, so they've met in the office, but this is the first time they've been assigned to do the same, sort of joint takedown. So it's a different animal than a SWAT team. It's a different animal than a regular operations team. I think some of these guys get to know each other well. I've got friends that are working in other cities that are doing that, where they've been working on the same team and they've been doing it for a couple of months together, so they get the rhythm down. But again, you got different agencies, different SOPs. The use of force policy is pretty much the same from DHS to DOJ. So both of those work pretty well together, but the individual experience, or how much time that they spent on one thing or another, and the person's individual experience, if they came out of a law enforcement background for being a cop, or if they spent all their time as a military police officer, or any of these other things, can really play into like how dramatically different someone's reaction is when you start dealing with chaos, which is what you were talking about, Matt. I mean, it's pretty chaotic. They've got multiple people doing things. Some of this stuff looks kind of sketchy. Like, I don't know how you justify going after people that are standing there with a phone. But the problem with these cell phone videos is we don't know what the context is. We don't know what those people were doing 20 minutes ago, or how long they've been following,
Correct.
How much provocation, or how much provocation they've been involved in, and whether or not this is just they preemptively stop something that they've already seen happen and roll out 5 or 6 times already, because we're just seeing a very narrow snippet. It's pretty hard to judge somebody, from watching 90 seconds of their life and then decide what kind of person they are.
Yeah, I would like to see that entire block for 20, 30, 40 minutes prior to that, and kind of see what all happened and how that transpired. And the other hard part is them blowing whistles and honking horns and everything else. Like, it's hard to determine like who's doing what and where it happened. Like, did they come after that lady because they were going to arrest her because she did something a few minutes ago and they just realized that's where she was? You don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're getting, again, like what he said, you're getting a small snippet, and that's all you're seeing is just that little piece of, okay, well, what happened prior to that? It's the same thing as the good one. When we saw that one, you're just getting the first part of the car, and all of a sudden they're shot. You don't get anything else until later. That's why I always tell people, like, pump the brakes a little bit. Wait till you see everything else come out.
And hey, guys, just real quick, make sure you guys hit that like, and make sure you subscribe to Kyle Seraphin on all of his different social medias. And I see people asking about the moderators. This is having moderators is something new that we're trying. Before, I was using a bot, and we have a few people who volunteered. So if you have any feedback on them, just let me know. And they're learning too, so take it easy on them as well. All right, let's see. Now we're going to test again. We're going to test the audio. So let me know if this echoes or not.
On ice to complete roughly 3,000 arrests per day and a million deportations within first year in office. And right now, ICE is on track to do about half.
Still echoing?
The White House press moved way faster.
Yeah.
Yep, still echo. Okay. Well, that's going to make it tough because we have a lot of media to go through. But I guess what we could do is we can go to the frame by frame of the video. We can skip to that. And then if we can get all the echo stuff worked out, we can go back into the other media. So let's do that. All right. So we'll start with Renee Good.
Oh, I like how you have this set up. You can
let me do full screen. No, not full screen. We want full viewer. Let's see. There's a way to go full screen. Give me 1 second. Where is it? Viewer mode. Here we go. Cinema. Okay. All right. So we're going to play back and forth, and we're going to look through some of these frames. And as we're doing this, we're going to look at, the different things of calmness, efficiency, use of force, follow through, and teamwork. So what I want to do is we'll do a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is terrible, poor. They did a horrible job. And 10 is like they did perfect. Everything they should have done by the book. And for each of these different areas, we'll rate them. And then also in the chat, anyone that's watching, feel free to put your number in too, so you can also rate these people. All right, so we'll start with this one. This was Renee Good. And this is the part where everyone said that he didn't get hit by the vehicle, okay? So we'll start with... Okay, so now let's go frame by frame. So as I go through here, to me, it looks like his leg is up. I don't know if you see that, but it looks like his leg is up in the front. And then as we go frame by frame, you can see him get hit or at least knocked back by something, right? So assuming it's the vehicle that's coming at him, and then you see his legs slide. So you can see these 2 frames here. His legs are sliding. He's not taking a step. So he's being pushed in this instance. And like I said, I'm just looking at the video. I don't have an opinion because, she was left and, supposedly like ICE is right and that kind of stuff. That's not any of my decision of what I'm showing. I'm just looking at purely the video. So to me, it looks like he got hit and then she went past him. Okay. So now there's a lot of questions. Why was he standing there? Right. So a lot of people are saying he's in this position. I've said before with this video, it appears that she backs into a position that puts him in front of her. But I want to rate this really quick. So for the officer, for calmness, for keeping cool, keeping a cool head, what would you rate him from 1 to 10? All right, Chris. So as far as this, he's standing in front of the vehicle. Like I said, it looks like she backs into a position that puts him there. But how would you rate his calmness in this situation?
I really don't know. It's hard to rate another guy's calmness when I'm not him. I've had vehicles, I've been around vehicles, I've been trained, at the front of the vehicle. Is that a great place to stand? It's not. You shouldn't stand there. We get taught that early in the academy and then throughout our career with vehicle takedowns and whatnot. Those are not 2 good places to stand, front and rear. However, if you look at his cell phone video, you can see that he was kind of working his way around that car. And I don't think he meant to be in the front. I think he saw and heard his partner say, hey, get out of the car. So he knew they were going to try to effect an arrest on her. And he was trying to move around, I think, to probably help them. I don't think he was starting there. I think he was moving around to the front to kind of give them extra cover there. And I think that's probably why it went that way. I don't think he was just standing there because we know from his video, this one here that you're showing, that he starts moving.
So as I understand it, Matt, they're doing that video that we're watching where he actually was circling the car. He's documenting what the vehicle is and he distinguishing mark on there in case they were to swap out the plates. You're getting the driver and a good, look in there. From what I understand is that's actually going out to their intelligence units and they're trying to build a database of people that are being provocateurs and that are following around. So that is something that makes people uncomfortable when it comes to kind of a First Amendment situation. The question of whether or not you can actually do some defensive intelligence gathering, I think you can. because they have no right to privacy there. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy out there driving your car. So my guess is that he was accomplishing a very different mission than affecting an arrest or any kind of use of force scenario. That's what it looked like to me. That's what I've heard it explained, and that doesn't jive like it would be immediately wrong. And so, yeah, like you say, Chris, put him in front of the car. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to be in front of the car when somebody's got the ability to use it as a weapon, because it makes you have to make a real rough decision one way or another, and it may not be great. So I don't think he was trying to do that. And whether he was affecting the arrest or not, or thought he was about to do that, another question. I mean, this guy had also, apparently been dragged not too long ago, 6 months ago.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I want to throw some flavor in there so people understand just the policy, because it's the same for DOJ as it is for DHS that the agents have to use. It's right up to the limit, the constitutional limit of Graham v. Connor for federal use of force. And some localities have different sort of distinctions, and they have like much more shading that goes on and a lot more caveats that pepper it in. But when it comes to being a federal law enforcement officer, there's only a couple things that have to be met. It has to be imminent danger. It has to be of death or serious physical injury. And that's very flexible, what serious physical injury means, because people, broken arm, anything that changes your life, a quality of life, injuries to the face can be that, destroying hand or breaking something there. So all those things can fit in there. And everybody's kind of taught their own version of what that looks like. It's not universal that we all know, oh, that's serious physical injury and that's not. And I've actually seen that happen from federal district to federal district when we're trying to actually prosecute that stuff. So major crime, serious bodily injury in some places. So just as an example for people, we were doing it up in Montana. We got a phone call in from the Indian reservation, guys in the hospital, and my buddy's taking calls, and they go, yeah, we have a stabbing. And my buddy goes, how stabbed is he? And he goes, like 3 lacerations, half-inch deep tops. And he goes, how many stitches? He goes, I don't know, like 8 or 10 and something like that. And he's like, all right, I'll float it up, but that's probably not going to be stabby enough for us to be able to pick it up as serious bodily injury. Now, you do the same thing on the face, then you've got it probably. So just so people understand that that's the deal. So anyway, imminent danger, death or serious physical injury, that's going to be the criteria. And then the real thing here is to the officer or to another person. And I'm speculating here, because at the end of the day, the reasonablest standard that has to be applied to these cops, or these federal agents rather, is what they saw in that space. And since we have no footage or understanding of what that guy saw, what he knew, what he thought was happening when it happened, everything is speculative. But there's a real chance that he's articulating based on his buddy being inside that window of the driver's side, and that he thought he could see his friend getting dragged down the road. So that can change the articulation when it comes to whether or not it's a justifiable shot, because the question was whether it went through the windshield, whether it went through the side mirror, whether it went through the the open driver's side window. All of those things are very differently charged once you start considering that he can also consider the life of somebody else, and then he thinks they're in jeopardy. He doesn't have to be right, by the way. He has to be reasonable. And so that makes people uncomfortable, because they're looking for like freeze frame, bit by bit. Oh, look, this happened and this happened. Life is not lived in instant replay and slow motion. It's lived by a guy who's standing there, here's a vehicle, and then he makes a decision. And whether or not he can articulate that in a reasonable way or not and fit those categories, that's what it comes down to for use of force. So
now, do both of you guys agree that a vehicle is a weapon in this case, or in similar kind of cases? If there's a person behind the vehicle and they can drive the vehicle towards you or towards other people, is that considered their use of force against you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's deadly force. The vehicle is deadly force.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
question.
So
this would be no different than her having a gun or a knife and coming towards you, correct? Or similar, right? Okay. So I want you to hear this really quick. Just listen to the guy. Actually, let me unmute it. Let me go back a little bit. So you can hear him go, ooh, and you can hear a thump when he gets hit. Okay. So a lot of people said that she never hit him. I mean, just based on his camera alone, and also the other angle, she definitely hit him. Now, how hard she hit him, or if she was trying to hit him on purpose and all that kind of stuff, that's all kind of up in the air. But it's very obvious he got hit. Okay. And then let's go back to...
Yeah, for what it's worth, she doesn't have to hit him for it to still be an attempt. You don't have to wait and assume unnecessary risk. See, this is where I think when you start seeing that the guy is in, look at the angle where the officer that did the shooting, he's somewhere on the other side of like the A-pole for the passenger side. And so all he can see is that he's got a buddy that is in and around that window. And as we understand it, he was recently dragged that way like 6 months ago. I can imagine, again, this is speculative, but you can imagine that somebody would see that as a much bigger threat than maybe I might today, because I've never been dragged by a vehicle trying to pull somebody out. I also don't get into windows like that. That's not my jam. But if you're in that window, or if you had recently been in that window, you could definitely see that as being a serious life threat.
I see. Oh, hold on, let me see the wrong one. Where is it? This chat's moving so quick. There's another video, another view. You're not playing Trigger. She did not hit him. And the 2 views that I just showed, she did hit him. So if there's another one where she didn't hit him, then I would argue that it's probably just an opinion. I'm just going based on what I see. I'm not I'm not here trying to make him hit her, and I'm not here trying to like protect him, saying that he didn't get hit, whatever. Like I don't have a side. But based on what I just saw, you can hear the thump of him getting hit, and you can see his phone get knocked up to his face. And in the other view, you can see he gets pushed with his legs straight. His legs are sliding on the ice because the vehicle's pushing him. So to say he didn't get hit is denial, and it's okay to feel that way, but it's probably something you have to come to terms with, because as more of this stuff keeps happening, if you're going kind of, based on your feelings and not what's actually in front of you and what you're seeing, that can be really dangerous. And that's how a lot of like rumors and issues get started.
I think a lot of people are getting really hung up on the whole, what was her intent and what was, what did it hit him? Did it not? Did it have to hit him? If the officer believed at that time that the vehicle was coming towards him and was going to cause him death or serious bodily harm, he could react the way he did, period. There's no, it doesn't matter if that was her intent or not. Because I've heard people say that too. Well, she didn't intend to hit him. Well, it doesn't matter. Like it matters for what the officer saw at that time and what he felt at the time. Again, that's why I was really hesitant on commenting on this until I saw the video a little bit more and got more information on it. Like you have to go back to his background too. Okay, if those guys have been hit, what's one of the things they ask you in court, officer, in your training and what? Experience. Yeah, he's had experience of being hit in 30 some stitches.
Yep.
Like, is that going to make him more prone to be a little bit worried about being hit by a car? Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you have her switching gears, the screech of the tires. So it was a hard acceleration. He's not looking down at the ground at the tires of which way she's turning. All he sees is a vehicle coming towards him. Again, to me, I think him being hit is a moot point because it doesn't matter. He felt like his life was in danger at that point. And again, you go back to the video you just showed, you can tell it made contact with him. So again, I feel that's kind of a moot point at this stage at it.
Well, and one thing I want to talk about too, and give me both your opinion, but this is really important. Okay. A lot of people get very emotional about certain things, which is fine. That's completely normal. At some point though, you have to start looking at the facts of things. So for example, side note, Charlie Kirk case, what if they come out of court with 100% proof in 4K that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie and they have him on the roof with the gun pulling the trigger and you see it all happen? Is everyone going to be like, okay, well then that's it? No, there's going to be people who are still emotionally, they're in other theories. They want to say the government's corrupt and all that kind of stuff. And there might be some pieces to that. But if they show proof that he did it and you deny it, then that's an emotional reaction and not a logical one. So just be really careful how you frame stuff. I would say have the emotional stuff, get that out of your system, and then go back and look at it again. Like, don't go off your first reaction. Look at it more than once. Like a lot of us, when we look at this video, we've seen it 50 or 100 times before we make a decision on it. Other people will see it once, go through their TikTok feed and say, oh my gosh, this is wrong. Did you see what happened? And just take off emotionally. Just be really careful of that. But what I wanted to say here is people are saying like Renee Good, she was a mother and, she was a good person and she was just trying to help out her wife and all that kind of stuff. And that might be true. But in the instant that she put her vehicle to block traffic and interfere with a federal investigation, she made herself a target for them. And she is technically obstructing the law. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but she's breaking some laws, basically.
Yeah,
right?
she's obstructing for sure. To what degree, or what that would actually be charged with. Listen, I think the choice that she made was that she made a terrible decision. Even if that decision was to flee, she doesn't have a right to flee. They asked her 3 times to step out of the vehicle politely before they did it impolitely or unpolitely. So That's not the choice is not, you got to give somebody room to leave. Certainly not in the federal system. There are certain municipalities, there are obviously some localities and states that require that sort of thing. You have to give people a reasonable exit. There are definitely contingencies built into the federal use of force that says you can't shoot at somebody solely to stop a fleeing vehicle. But in the world that we're talking about, a fleeing vehicle that is solely being stopped by gunfire, that's like shooting out the tires on something that is driving on a dirt road where there are no people in sight. Because all you need to do is articulate that you thought that person was a danger to onlookers, other vehicles, cross traffic. Like, take your pick. There are many reasons why you may want to disable a moving vehicle, and so those things fit into the use of force policy. The federal use of force policy, for everyone's understanding, is very permissive. And when I had cops come through the academy with me, and they had experience in other areas doing law enforcement, policing, which is different than federal law enforcement. If you ever meet federal agents, they'll always say, "I'm in law enforcement." They won't say they're a cop because they're not. Whenever you see that, they would say, "Man, this is really a permissive system." And it is, because they're not doing chance encounters. Let's just take all the emotion out of it. Let's say Renee Good was making the best decision possible for her. She was trying to evade the officers and leave. She was trying to unplug from that situation and break contact. Let's say that. It's completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. The guy in front, all that matters, and I say this to a lot of people too when we start talking about use of force, and this is not my first time talking about it. It doesn't matter what any of us think. It doesn't matter what anybody in chat thinks. It doesn't matter what some pundit thinks. It doesn't matter what the FBI director thinks, or the president of the United States, or the Homeland Security Secretary. None of those people's statements are relevant, other than the Trump administration has indicated they're going to support these guys that are involved in the shootings, and that is relevant politically. It's relevant for the guy to know that the agency is going to stand behind him, because I'm guessing, Chris, you can probably attest to, there are plenty of agencies that if you get into a shooting, you're screwed, and everybody knows somebody that's been in that spot where it's like they may not stand behind you. I had that experience when I was out in Portland, for whatever it's worth. When I was with the FBI, I was out there in 2020 in some of these like chaotic scenarios, 100 days of riots. And I thought if we got into a shooting, and there was always a possibility because the people were nuts, that I probably wouldn't be backed by my agency. They would probably come for charges if they could. But so the Trump administration saying that is great. At the end of the day, it's the man in front of the car, what he saw, what he perceived, why he acted the way he did, and how he articulates that. That's going to be the only thing that comes into whether or not it's justified or not. And that is a totally separate animal from how people feel about it and react to it and do TikToks. And so anyway, you can divorce.
I'd agree with you. Sorry, I agree with you 100% on that. Like, I think a lot of the feelings come into effect with this, and it's very emotional. It's very emotional for me to watch law enforcement go through this and to see people like act the way they're acting. But I also see this side on the family side too, of going, their loved ones are involved in these things, and somebody's losing their life over, bad decisions, and it sucks. But in the long run, you're correct. It's the facts that matter. We need to let due process go through, and they'll figure this out. To me, we go back to like Chauvin in Minnesota when he was leaning on the neck of that guy, and everybody looked at me and they're like, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, "Well, it doesn't look good, because as a defensive tactic instructor, I would never teach a guy to keep a knee on somebody's neck that long." And then what happened in the end? He was charged, he was convicted. It was kind of where I thought it was going to go. But again, I'm very careful saying that before any of the facts come out, before it goes to trial. I'm not there. I'm not seeing it. And that's what a lot of people like, seeing things through a fisheye camera. You're not getting the whole story. You're not feeling what that officer felt. There's a lot of other factors to it. And I keep seeing people on the chat bringing up that her being, breaking whatever law they want to call it, whether it's obstructing, a federal officer or whatever, that's not a death sentence. Well, that doesn't mean that that's why they shot. They were going to arrest her from the vehicle. I think a lot of people have a hard time separating that. They think that she was shot because they were going to arrest her. That's not the case. It was the action of her trying to get away, and the officer felt like, that she was going to get hit. And that's the bottom line. I keep hearing that argument, and I'm like, that arrestable or not doesn't make a difference. Like, even if she wasn't under arrest and she tried to run somebody over, you have the same outcome.
Well, and she also tried to disengage, according to people, but that's after she already engaged, right? So you can't go up to an officer with a gun drawn and say, "Oh, never mind," and put it back in your holster and walk away, right? You've already threatened them.
The other thing that I have heard too is they're telling a lot of these people that are kind of being trained almost to go do these things, that if you have a chance to get away, for the most part, are the federal officers going to chase you down for an obstruction charge? Probably not. Well, again, that's why they're videoing, and they're going to maybe come look for you later. That's why they're changing their plates, but if they can get away, they're probably told, hey, if you can obstruct a little bit to the point where you're, getting in the middle of things, and if you can get away, they're probably not going to chase you down. And they're just trying to do their job. They're trying to get the things done that they're doing, whether it was people in their car they had arrested that they were trying to get to, or they're trying to get to another location, whatever. Like, most of the time, they're not going to mess with you if they can get away. And I think that's one of the things that they were taught. And it's pretty obvious that's what they were thinking.
It's worth knowing too that she made a choice at that time, and I think it was a poor decision. I think it's tragic that she lost her life during that time, but she made a decision that was the difference between being detained, most likely, probably having a rough experience, people yelling in her face or telling her that what a stupid and dangerous thing she had done. And she has no idea how dangerous what she was doing was. You don't know who the ICE alien is that they're arresting. So if you don't know why, you're seeing a bunch of men wearing plate carriers and rifles on purpose. They didn't just show up there, and that's just not how they dress. You have an option to carry a rifle or not. When they do these operations, they're trying to target people that are bad. You don't know what kind of things, community support. You're grabbing a gang member. Maybe they've got additional buddies that are in their clique or part of their crew that's in the area. So all of these things you're entering into a complete unknown when you decide to start obstructing these agents. That's just a general rule. But she probably would have been detained, had a rough few minutes. Someone would have told her she was being a fool. And the odds are they wouldn't have pursued it. I don't think they would have arrested her, because generally speaking, that's a real pain in the butt. They're there for a reason, and that's not it. So she made a choice between basically being able to complain on the nightly news and having dinner with her son and trying to escape. And the resulting consequence was the worst case scenario, which is that the guy felt like, his life was in danger, or somebody else was, and he reacted with deadly force. All of that is really sad. It doesn't take away the sadness of it. It doesn't take away the human loss. I really get irritated with people with the FAFO thing, because there's a lot of people that have acted like this. That officer or that agent, I don't know if he was an officer or an agent, but I do know that he probably didn't wake up that morning and think, I'm going to go kill somebody today. Because that's not what people think. What you do is you wake up and you go, I hope I don't put in that situation. Now, look, if there's a bad scenario where someone's doing bad things, put me there. Like, Lord, put me in the place with the training, the skills I have to be able to intervene. Sure. I hope that if a church is going to have someone walk in and do something dangerous, I hope it's mine and I'm paying attention. But at the same time, nobody wakes up every day and goes like, yeah, I'm going to go find somebody and I'm going to go take out my irritation on them because they're using whistles or driving their car like an idiot. It's just that's not practical. So the FAFO thing that's happening on the political right, I actually find that kind of disgusting too. It's people that they're cheering on something that they clearly do not understand. They don't understand the burden that man's going to end up carrying for a long time, because he's going to second guess it through the shooting review board, whether or not there's a local attempt to charge him, which I don't think there will be. There's some reasons why, if you guys want to get into that, but end of the day, another administration could come in and could change their mind and decide not to support him after a positive finding on the shooting review. So all of this stuff is going to be putting his life in turmoil for a very long time. And nobody wants that.
One of the things that's really important too, I wanted to share is like, these people could have been angels in every possible way in their life, but in the moment that they broke the law or obstructed justice or whatever they were doing in that moment, then they become a different person, right? So whatever they're doing in that second, that's what you judge them on, not based on their past. So like a lot of people are saying, like Alex, right? We're going to talk about Alex too. They're saying he's a 37-year-old ICU nurse and read some kind of special thing on Veterans Day to a veteran who was in the hospital. And that's all great. But then we've also found out that he's into radical activism, and he had an abolish ICE sign on his apartment window. And he came to a rally. He came to on purpose to mess with ICE with a fully loaded handgun with backup magazines. So what was his intention? Why would he bring all of that ammunition to go to a peaceful protest? It's very strange, right? You just have to
share just a second.
Yep. Yeah, but you have to start thinking on a bigger level, right? All right, so
I'll say this in defense of, because I'm kind of a Second Amendment absolutist, and that's not necessarily the case that everybody who does law enforcement thinks that, but I do. I mean, I'm a constitutionalist first, and I think that those rights are inalienable, and I think that we should all have, like, to the point where I actually argue that people who are felons should be able to easily get reinstated. And they're actually moving that way. I think that's actually positive. Either you're safe enough to join us in society or you're not, and if you are, then you should be a citizen. Citizens can carry a firearm if they so choose. So I have that, and that may be a little bit outside the range for a lot of people that do law enforcement for work. And it's just, I don't know where you can draw the line and keep it safely. That being said, a guy deciding to carry 2 magazines or carry 1 magazine, even though I don't think that's necessary in my life, doesn't mean that he doesn't have the right to do it. And so, at the end of the day, you get down to that narrow circumstances. Like, all the background stuff is interesting. It's who they were. Maybe that shapes their view of the world. But it comes down to who pulled the trigger, why, and what was their motivation in that exact moment. And was it justifiable for that little period of time? And every circumstance is always different. So the Renee Good shooting is very, very different than the one that happened with this other guy.
So what I want to do is look at this. We don't have to spend a lot more time on this particular one. A lot of people want to see the Alex Pretti one. So we're going to get that here in a second. But people said that she was backing up. So yes, she is backing up here. Clearly, you see her tail lights, right? You see the backup lights go on. And then they go off. She switched it to drive here. Okay. And now watch the front tire. The front tire spins out right there. See that? So the back tire is not moving. The back rim is not spinning. The front one is. Right? And for her to spin out like that, there has to be something wrong with her traction control, or she is basically trying to gun it. She hit the gas pretty hard, right? That doesn't just happen. In some vehicles that are malfunctioning, that can happen. But it's pretty clear here that she's giving it gas, and now you see the vehicle moving forward. Now look where the officer is. He's drawing his gun as she's coming straight at him. Her tire's not turned yet. Okay, so that's what he's seeing. That's his point of view. And like Kyle was saying, when he goes to court and he's testifying, he's not going to say, "Oh, well, she was turning away from me after she hit me." He's going to say she was coming straight at me and she hit me, right? So looking at this moving forward, he's still drawing, and about, she's already moved multiple, like what, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, maybe. That's a
real quick draw, by the way. His reaction time was very, very quick.
Yeah,
that was
good. I haven't put it on a timer, but the shots break. It looks like all 3. Was it 3 shots? We think looked like it was sub-second. So his splits are like 30. Maybe in the 20s. He's shooting quickly, and each shot is he's individually accountable for. A lot of people point that out. Well, how do you justify the one through the windshield? Sure, but how do you justify as you're still shooting? That string of fire, it's going to be looked at in a reasonable scenario, and as long as he articulates it for the reason. If the reason was, I thought she was trying to still kill me, she could easily change direction, especially if she'd already hit him, or he's worried about other people downrange, or he's worried about his buddy. So again, we don't know what the articulation is. And for everybody that's already decided what they're, people basically come to this video and they already know what they think. And I think that's the worst part. It's like, none of what we think actually matters at the end of the day. We're just kind of, I think what we can give is what the parameters are that justify it or don't. If you come in and you decided, well, he got hit or he didn't get hit and the tires were this way or that way, again, we let it off with totally irrelevant. There's one guy whose opinion of what happened, and he has to be able to be articulating it in a certain way, and then a reasonable officer with the same training and experience would have to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I could see why you would do that." Doesn't have to
look at the force science behind it too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, continue. Go ahead.
You look at the force science behind almost all those shootings like that, and a lot of people get that, oh, they overshot the guy. Well, it takes, a 1.5 seconds to sometimes 2 seconds for your brain to get to your nerves through your system to tell you, hey, stop shooting. It's not a threat anymore. It's sometimes, especially when his splits are that fast, I guarantee you, like he probably felt like he didn't pop off that many rounds. He might not even know how many he did. A lot of these officers don't. Like it's the reaction of it and how quick it was is the important part to look at there. Again, the science behind it, behavior behind it, human behavior is going to show that he, shot an appropriate amount. It doesn't matter if he cracked a shot when the vehicle's past him. You look at the time frame from first shot to there, that's enough to see. Again, force science shows us that his brain's still trying to process a little bit of that. It's going to take him a second or two to stop that shooting.
And all of this stuff gets factored in when they do the review. So I'm not even sure this is ever going to end up in a local court in any way. So there's a legal decision. In 1890, there was a federal U.S. Marshal, I want to say it was, that was trying to effect an arrest in California and then was detained by California authorities. And so the Supreme Court came out and made a decision that when federal officers or agents are in pursuit of their duty, they're scoped in their duty for what they are doing, then the local jurisdiction has no ability to actually prosecute them. It becomes a federal matter and it goes to the supremacy clause. So that's long standing. I mean, we're talking 140 plus years, as long as DOJ is not willing to hand him over. And that's a totally different situation than what happened in the Chauvin case, because in that case, you had a state peace officer, and then the feds actually piled on and did their own civil rights investigation on top of it. This is the exact opposite. This is a federal agent in a federal operation. And what you even heard already is that the governor and the police commissioner, or the public safety commissioner for the state of Minnesota, he stated, we didn't get to do an investigation. And they don't have any power to compel the DHS to give them that, or FBI, if FBI did the shooting review, which they probably did. They can't get that. So there is no way that they can actually go out there and charge it, because they won't have any of the interviews. They won't have any of the evidence. They won't have the ballistics. They won't have any of the background information required to make a charge. All they can do is see a video, and that's not going to be enough for them to do anything.
No, this is a great question. Yeah, this is a really good question. So is there a protocol for detaining a vehicle? Is there a particular formation? The officers didn't seem organized.
Yeah, we absolutely have one. I don't know if, these guys did. We actually train that. We have felony vehicle stops. We have all kinds of different trainings that we do for that. But you're looking at something that, hey, you have multiple things happening here. Like, this isn't them wanting to contact her. Like, she made the contact and stopped. So the two officers that were going towards the door, that's pretty standard. They're going to, hey, let's get you out of here. We're going to get you out of the vehicle. And again, the guy going around the car, I think he hit on it when he said, that's kind of their protocol. Now they're trying to get, some video evidence also if they're going to come find these folks later. So him being in the front of the car, again, not a great place. But if they were going to actually make contact with this car, it'd be more specific. But again, this is something that was ongoing. This was pretty rapidly evolving. So were they going by what their protocol was? Probably the two guys approaching the driver's door, yeah. And the guy that was filming, probably something, again, they've been told to do here and there, get if you can get a 360 view of the car. So again, I don't think he was placing himself there. That was not something that he wanted to be. None of us would want to be in front of that car.
All right, so let's go ahead and start looking at this footage. And can you both hear each other? I just want to do a quick sound check.
I'm good now.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead and go look at this now. All right, so this is the Alex Pretti, and there's several angles, but so kind of like a quick breakdown. Obviously, this is an ICE officer, and he's pushing this woman, knocks her down, and now this is Alex, kind of in the middle in this gray coat, and he's he put his hand on the officer, so he's being directly confrontational with the ICE officer. Now, is he protecting the woman? Probably. Right. So from what I've heard, he doesn't even know this woman, but then he gets maced. So this has already started in a situation where the ICE officer pushed the girl. We don't know what happened before that. To Chris's point earlier, we don't know anything that led up to this point. And then we have her get knocked down, macing. They mace her. More mace.
Everybody gets a little bit.
Huge mace budget, right?
Apparently.
And then now they're pulling him off of her. I don't know if he's trying to help her up or what. And then now he's holding onto her coat, and they're pulling him away.
Yeah, and all of this stuff. So we didn't talk about it on the previous scenario, but there's a concept called the sympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous reaction that happens when people start getting into these high confrontation. It doesn't matter if a car hits you. It doesn't matter if you're about to shoot or someone shoots at you. Your body's going to dump adrenaline, and it's going to cause a lot of things to happen. First of all, you're going to have your blood goes in certain places. It goes to major muscle groups. So people, a lot of times, like the pupils start constricting, and people act irrationally. Sometimes they'll clench on things and they won't let go, and they won't recognize that they've done that. So they'll lock on like a pit bull does. And we don't know what his stress experience was. If he's an ICU nurse, is that what it is? He's an ICU or an ER nurse?
Yeah, I think it's ICU.
Yeah, I don't know if he spent a bunch of time in like a critical care unit, or if he's done any flight medicine, or if he's done like the really, high gravity where it's just you and a couple people, where people tend to learn how to handle stress a little bit differently. If he's used to a real controlled area and doesn't work a lot of code, you just don't know what people's reaction is going to be when someone shoves you, you're falling on the ice. OC is its own animal. When you start getting sprayed with pepper spray or a mace or anything to that effect, people act, it closes down the window on what you can see and what you're willing to react to. It can change the way you breathe. A lot of times these people have like a difficult breathing. So a lot of panic symptoms, as well as that sort of like fight or flight syndrome kicking in, which is the That's the common way of saying it. What people often forget is in the sort of fight or flight, there's actually a third F, and that's freeze. And that, in my experience, a lot of people that don't have any training, they freeze more frequently than not. So my wife is a great example of this. I'll yell at her about something that's dangerous and she'll just do nothing. And it drives me insane. Like, it's like the worst thing in the world you could do, but a lot of human beings do that. It's kind of like a deer in the headlights. They'll lock on and they'll either repeat what they were doing or they'll do nothing at all and not move. And you could see him being non-compliant, not because he means to be, but just because he's locked in and he's on what we call vapor lock or anything along those lines.
So I guess the big takeaway is that he is obstructing justice, whatever they're doing. I don't know if clearly they're not after this woman. If they're trying to detain her, I don't know why they shoved her.
I mean, that's troubling. So some of the optics on this are truly awful. Why they decided to go and shove this woman, what she did just before that is really questionable. We don't know. And that's where the narrative victories are won by people who are trying to say that this was really unjustifiable. You have no idea what she had just done previously, whether or not she was a threat to the officers. That guy touching them, that's technically an assault on a federal officer, but that's not a chargeable assault in almost any district I've ever lived in, unless there's some real bodily harm. I've had Border Patrol guys get in fights trying to bring an alien into custody, and they'll try to bring an AFO. And as an FBI agent, we would investigate the assault on federal officer. And we'd be like, what's the damage? And the guy'd be like, you broke my sunglasses. I'm like, that sucks, bro. But like, nobody's going to take that case and run it. So when that stuff happens, you can bump into someone and technically be in violation of the law and still basically be unchargeable. Not that guy knows that, but those agents know that. A bump, shoulder check or something like that, that's not going to end up with somebody in handcuffs at the end of the day.
So even though he was getting handsy and that kind of stuff while getting sprayed, right? So like you said, he could be reaching out trying to like block a theoretical sprayer, right? He has no idea he can't see anymore, theoretically. Yeah. But like you said, he's not punching the officer in the face. He's not tackling an officer. So in theory, like, yes, he is interfering and it could technically be a felony, right? Because he's kind of touching an officer, maybe assaulting them. But they're pulling them apart. And again, I don't know their relation. I don't know if Alex knows this woman. From what I've heard, he doesn't. But as they separate them, Alex goes to the ground.
The only thing that complicates all this is that he's open carrying, from what I can tell. And that changes calculus and how people interact. When you start resisting, I would find that to be I don't have a ton of experience with people resisting with open carry, so I don't know what these guys were thinking either.
Is there video of him showing him open carry, or where did he have that jacket?
He had an open carry holster. It was on a right hip holster. Okay. So
I just didn't know if we had, I didn't see any video of him where you could actually see it like outside of his clothes. So I didn't know if the jacket was somewhat covering it. And when they started wrestling around, it came out. That's the thing. I didn't see anything like that yet. But
yeah, I guess that's the claim that I'm seeing. So I might be jumping to a conclusion on that. Whether they knew he was carrying then or whether they saw it. The guy's disarmed. We can get to that in just a second too. I don't know if you've, Chris, I'm actually fascinated to know if there's a tactic where someone says disarm while in the middle of scuffle. Because I've never seen that done. But
when we practiced any of these with our defense tactics in our teams, like it depended on what we were doing. Mm-hmm. But if you can control that person and keep it like in the holster, great. But if you start trying to pull it out, like that's another piece. Like, do you have control of the person? Can they get it? Like, there's a lot of factors there. I want to back up just a little bit though, because you touched on a couple things with pepper spray, that these guys got pepper sprayed. Well, anybody that's been involved in any kind of crowd control knows if you start dousing that pepper spray like he's doing, and his has obviously got not a short stream, but if you look at it, it's almost like a fogger. Everybody else around him is getting it too. And including him. Those officers have been exposed to it multiple times, but people have different reactions to it. Like I could put the stuff on my Cheerios. It doesn't bother me, but I've been around it and I've been exposed to it so many times. Like, to me, it's just not too big of a deal. But I've also seen people that have never been exposed to it get hit with it and they smile right back at you. It's just like a taser. If the probes don't connect, it doesn't always work. So less lethal. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But again, these agents probably got a little bit of that too. And again, I would like to see prior to what happened there, because I have no idea why that agent pushed that lady. There's nothing prior to that I have seen yet, besides a couple videos of cars passing and recording. So it's hard to tell. Like, why was he making contact with her? I don't understand the big push. If she had a camera in her hand, I don't know what was going on there. Like it's like we kind of talked about before. Was that somebody that was agitating before that they said, hey, she's going to be arrested, and they were still looking for her? I have no idea. Like there's too much to this that we need to see what's happened prior before we start making a decision on whether or not he had the right to push her. Again, that's not really the task at hand here. Is like, okay, what happened with the other guy? And when they start grabbing somebody, if you're on the ground with somebody and you start realizing there's a gun, for the most part, what we trained with was that we said gun, suspect has gun, don't touch it, don't move. But you got, again, people screaming in the background. You have horns, whistles. You have people blowing whistles in the background, the sounds that are going on there. The other thing that he talked about was the behavior of your body, what happens when we're under stress. The amount of adrenaline and the amount of cortisol and the amount of other chemicals being dumped into your system is going to depend on your experience into it, but it's also going to depend on how stressful you feel it is in that moment. Some of those officers might be under higher levels than others if they've had some more experience or not. So, and again, adding pepper spray or mace or whatever they're using, I'm guessing it's pepper spray. I see a little bit of the orange, so I'm guessing it's OC. Mm-hmm. But that's going to add some stressors to that. The other thing that's happening with all that sound, you're going to have audio exclusion. Besides the tunnel vision and the loss of fine motor skill, there's a lot going on there that all of these guys are having to deal with. So if somebody said gun, somebody felt it, he grabbed it. Again, I haven't seen anything to show any of that. The only thing I saw was the one video of the guy running away, and he had a gun in his hands. And I go, okay, is that the suspect's gun? Or is it another officer whose gun fell out of his hand? Or is it another officer whose gun fell out of a cheap holster? I don't know. Again, I wasn't there. I have no idea.
Yeah, we're going to be getting to that here in a minute about the what people think happened possibly, but we'll get to that here in a second. But so in the chat, if you can, first of all, hit that like. It helps YouTube push this out. And also, I'm curious, have you ever been maced or pepper sprayed? So in the chat, if you've ever been maced or pepper sprayed, put a 1. If you've never experienced the joy, put a 2.
The joy.
I've been hit by pepper spray, but not mace. I heard mace can be worse in some cases.
I get real rowdy about CS. CS is what knocks me down. I don't have nearly as much a reaction to OC. It's not my favorite. It's not fun, but it's I can function. But CS makes
the opposite. Like pepper spray, I'm usually okay with, but that CS, if it's CS, that starts getting into you a little bit more, and it's more chemical based.
Yeah, everything that has a hole in my head starts making fluids come out of it.
Snot everywhere and crying everywhere.
Yeah, just gagging, and I just look like I had a really bad breakup, and it's very emotional. It's just everything comes out of my face. So yes.
So Leaf, you said not yet. Are you planning?
That's a good answer. That's a very realistic answer.
All right.
Somebody asked what CS is in the chat. If you hear somebody say mace, usually that's what it is. The government used to use what we called CN back in 50s and 60s, and they found out that wasn't as effective and that it can possibly cause cancer. So they switched to CS, I think, I don't know what that was, 70 something. And that's what most departments are going to use if they're using like a chemical spray. If it's like something that's, deployed from, a 40 mic or something similar to that is usually that. But there's two different kinds. There's your CS, and then most other departments are using an OC. Like if it's a little bit orange, usually that's OC unless it's a CS that's been marked and it has like some paint or something in it, some sort of marker in it.
All right, let's see. All right, let's keep moving forward on this video. And people are asking, do we have other angles? Yes, we have multiple different camera angles on this.
Do you have the stabilized version of this shot? Is that what this is?
Yeah. Okay, so they're taking him down. Now, at this point,
it's really chaotic in there too. So anybody who thinks they know what's going on, imagine how crazy it is for each one of these people that's doing what they're involved in. Look at the guy in the black hat that's standing there, that's in between. He's not sure where he's supposed to be going. You got another guy that's just chilling up at the hood. I mean,
that guy looks like he's lost in translation.
He's one of those guys is literally
might be a freeze right there.
Yeah, there's your freeze, or where do I plug in? Or, I mean, like nobody's doing crowd control.
He's like, all right, now maybe I'll get some hands on.
Yep.
You basically look like you got about 4 officers with hands on, but you also have some agitators coming in behind him here, and that's another thing that officers have to worry about. So they're getting hit from all sides there.
Now we're going to see something here in a minute. So if this is his holster, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if that's his holster there, it appears that as the gun is not in it, right? And we're going to see from a different angle. It does appear as though this guy here with this, I don't know, is this brown? I can't really tell. It appears that has the gun, and we're going to see here in a minute what might have caused this whole reaction to kind of like the chain reaction, I should say. So we're going forward. And that's the end of that one, right? And obviously he gets hit after that. And then this is a different angle. Now, watch this guy here. So he comes up. They're struggling, fighting, struggling. And now watch. So this guy here has this gun.
With a gun with an optic, which is at least consistent with what was shown as the guy's SIG.
Yep. And obviously we can't see the grip, but he had like a white or pearl or shiny kind of like custom grip.
Yeah, it's one of the AXG grips. It's aluminum.
Okay. The Legion. Yeah. So here is where it gets kind of a little conspiratorial, right? So people, we don't know, like, again, is it his gun? Is it someone else's gun they dropped? Is this Alex's gun? We don't really know, but whatever gun it was, this person has it. Why is he running away? Right? Because like as of right now, everyone else is still over Alex.
I can think of a probable reason why you're going to go and put this into evidence somewhere. I mean, like you're getting it out of the fight. You're trying to get it away from the area. It's you're controlling it, and you want to make sure that you have a heads up. You have now a loose weapon, and now it's not a loose weapon. You're securing it. So you could see somebody doing that. It doesn't seem like the most heads up move. I don't know if I don't know if there's an SOP on something like that. Again, I've never seen somebody try to be disarmed in the middle of a scuffle like that.
Yeah.
You'd obviously, if that was the case, if it was a loose gun that was an officer's, or if it was a gun that was his, I mean, him getting it out of the fight was probably the best route to go, because you don't want to be holding his gun. You don't know what is it functional, is it not?
Right. You don't know the
conditions.
conditions.
Thing is we usually train that most suspects will carry more than one weapon system. Could he have a knife? Could he have another gun? Could he have something else? They don't know. The other thing is that officer may have pulled that away. Did any of those other officers see him do that? They may not have. Somebody might have said gun, and they see an empty holster. They may not have seen that guy run off with it. They could have felt like he still had a weapon. So until we get that, like everybody's statements and all the reports in, and they figure out who said what and what they saw and who shot first. Again, it's all, opinion at that point. We're not going on facts again.
Well, this is 8 seconds.
U.S. police officers have zero hand-to-hand combat. I would say that's pretty far off. I can tell you, I have a black belt in Krav Maga, and we taught Krav Maga to all of our guys, and we also did a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a lot of other departments that did too. So there's a lot that have hand-to-hand combat. I don't know about these guys, though. Again, I can't speak for them.
Yeah, there's. I just
want to check real quick. Chris and Kyle, can you guys hear each other?
I can. Yep.
Chris, can you hear Kyle?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Okay, cool. All right, go ahead, Kyle.
So this whole thing takes maybe 8 seconds from the shove until the actual shooting goes on in real time. And so we're sitting here dissecting it over a period of 20 or 30 minutes, and we're kind of chewing on different little bites of it and angles of it. And each one of these guys has a very narrow look, and the fog of war inside of this thing is nuts. And like Chris was just saying, empty holster, guy's hands are not visible, gun. That can mean something very different. One guy gets a great idea. Hey, this is a loose weapon system, or I'm able to secure it and I'm going to bug out with it. Maybe that's a great heads up move on his part, but it's not communicated because we're dealing with 1.5 seconds later, there's shots fired. And I don't know if I can confirm it or not. There's different angles as we look at it, but there's a real possibility there was an ND involved. And so gun, empty holster, an ND where a shot goes off. A reaction starts shooting at somebody who was known to be armed or appeared to be armed right then, or you just found out they were armed and then you found out that you can't find out where the gun is. It's, again, you can have a justifiable shoot in this and it still be an awful situation. And at the end of the day, it looks terrible. I mean, it looks terrible from everybody that's looking from all these angles. Nobody's looking at this and going, yeah, this is cut and dry. This guy this guy was asking for it and he got what he deserved. That's not what I see here, but it doesn't mean it's not justified. In fact, there's a better than average chance it will be a justifiable shoot, even if it's terrible.
So yeah, someone's asking what an ND is. That's a negligent discharge. That's where the gun goes off unexpectedly, typically from someone having their finger on the trigger and some other type of thing happening. But in the case of the P320, which is what this gun is,
Allegedly.
there have been discharges that have happened without user input. So, allegedly, right?
Allegedly.
Like, allegedly.
Don't get SIG coming after you.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, they might call you later.
Well, I've done multiple videos on this.
I know, and we've talked about that, and I'm kind of with you. I think it could have been an ND. Again, we don't know. We're all speculating on that 8 seconds, and again, we have all the time in the world, like you guys said, to look at it now. But it was pretty chaotic, and again, they may not have heard it. Somebody might have heard on the pile. My other thought was did somebody grab a hold of an officer's gun? I don't know. You can't see his hands all the time. You can kind of see him like on the ground, but he may have been grabbing something else. I don't know. Again, it's a lot of speculation, and until you get more of the facts come out, I think I have kind of look at that.
I have one thing that supports the idea that they're disarming him and that it's his gun that the guy runs off with, and that's if you watch right here, down in the corner. Watch, you'll see a mag get thrown out. That's one of his magazines on the ground right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're stripping stuff off of him because of where it went. It didn't just get like casually knocked off and fell on the ground. Someone purposefully took that and threw it behind them. Okay, so based on that tells me they're stripping his concealed carry stuff off of him, or actually open carry, I guess in this case. So if he's open carrying his guns on the outside, his mags are on the outside. They toss his magazine.
I mean, he could still have outside the waistband and still be concealed carrying if he has a concealment garment. So, end of the day. And I'm very much against what I just heard the FBI director come out and say, which is that, if you show up to a protest, you can't have extra mags and you can't have a gun and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, I've interacted with law enforcement officers on a regular basis, both when I was a Fed and when I was, since. You can interact with them all the time. You have to do it in a specific way. What you usually see, and I'll take you guys input on this too, but my experience is that when you're carrying, that the gravity of what you do is a lot more significant. And so I'm very deliberate about where my hands go and what I do. And I mean, I've been in open carry rigs having interactions with a cop who didn't know who I was, didn't know about my agency, could see my badge, but doesn't mean anything to him. And he's looking at it going, who are you and what are you about? And it's like, yeah, my hands are going to be up here on my chest. And I'm going to be talking to you in an easy way. I'm going to tell you who I am. And before I make any movements, we're going to know what it is. It's like, I don't need to make him spooked out. He doesn't need to spook me out either. So that sniffing thing, this guy, obviously got involved in a confrontation. His hands are on his phone. I agree with people who say it shouldn't be a death sentence. I don't think it should be. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't a justifiable shooting. And it doesn't mean that this didn't go the wrong way in a way that they can articulate properly. But I also don't think that you should be able, just shot because you happen to show up somewhere and you happen to carry a gun in America. That doesn't sound right.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. It was one of the things I didn't like when Chrissy Nome came out and they started talking about that this guy showed up at this thing with 2 magazines and a handgun with all this ammunition, and that it was obvious that he was there to hurt, a bunch of law enforcement. And I was like, that is complete speculation. I know multiple guys, and I train like hundreds of concealed carriers a year. And I always tell people, carry an extra mag, carry 2 if you can. You never know. Like, are most shootings more than 2 mags? No, but could there be a chance you need an extra mag? Yes. So I think it's kind of ridiculous that they're saying that this guy showed up with that intent of hurting many people. I don't think that was the case at all. Again, he was a licensed concealed carrier. He didn't have his ID on him, which they're supposed to in Minnesota. But again, I don't really feel like that points towards him trying to hide anything. Again, that's more speculation. But again, they need to wait. You got to wait till you get all the information. Again, I'm a facts guy, and I don't know them all here. And it's another one of those I go, could have been, we talked about the ND. Could it have been another one of those officers, just they heard gun. The guy turned, he felt like he was, reaching, and then he shot. That very well could be too.
Yeah, there's an entire, series of case law for furtive motions and furtive movements of people. And so if you guys have not ever read that before, you can do your own homework on there if you're listening or if you're watching. Probably worth looking, type that in and get a look at what it looks like. There are cases that are decided regularly on this sort of thing. The idea of a furtive movement, going down for the waistband, accessing a weapon, or doing a motion that is consistent with accessing a weapon is often justification. It still can be really sad. It's someone going for their wallet, going for their phone, they get jumpy. These things happen. It doesn't mean that the officer knows what that was, because nobody's looking into somebody else's head and going, oh yeah, I know what they're doing. He's trying to scratch his nose. He's trying to, take a grab and scratch himself in the groin or something. Like, you just don't know what someone's going to do, and you got to react with what the information you have at that moment. And sometimes it's aggressive. People take on, I think cops take on unusually unnecessary risks more often than they don't. That's been the sort of experience that I've seen. And I've never talked to somebody who said, like, I had an opportunity to smoke someone and I did it right away. I know a lot of cops that have a story of, I could have pulled the trigger and I didn't. And you'd find that out all the time whenever you're sitting around swapping stories about what goes on.
We don't have time to talk about mine, but I could tell you about plenty.
All right. So, yes. So there is rumors of an ND. There are videos that zoom in and show supposedly the slide of the gun. So somewhere around there. And we're going to look at it. I can't play audio because we're echoing for some reason, but it does appear that for like one frame, the slide is back as though you fired a round.
Do we see an impact mark on the ground or anything like that, or any kind of
you can see a little bit of like mist or gas, it looks like, from the next video that we'll look at.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as marks on the ground, people were showing marks on the opposite side. Right? Like the people, we'll get to it. But so that's the theory that's going on right now, is this officer, they disarm him. Officer grabs his gun. We assume in this case, it could be the officer's gun. He grabs the gun, and as he's running away to maybe, like you said, Kyle, maybe he's trying to put it in evidence or something else, or just put it, lock it up so the guy doesn't have access to it. He fires off a round, boom, right here. And then as soon as that happens, because you can see everyone else is still over him. If he had shot at this point, this wouldn't be the only guy running. Okay? Like, they would all be reacting. So the shot hasn't happened yet. And then boom, this is where it seems that the shot happens. And then as we move forward, then you see everyone else start to react and start shooting after that.
Including the camera person there.
Correct. So based on that seems to be the current story, is that it was a negligent discharge by this officer. Theoretically, it might have been a different one, but this makes the most sense since he's running away with the gun. And this firearm is allegedly notorious for doing that, even if you just manipulate the slide in certain ways and things like that. So that's kind of where this one is at. I can pull up different angles, but did you guys want to add anything while I'm doing that? I know this one, obviously, you never want loss of life. I'll never say killing anyone is justified, but if they put themselves in certain situations, and if the officers are reacting in a certain way based on their experience, and that's where you have the perfect meeting of two situations that create, this type of stuff we're seeing, and it's unfortunate. And we have stuff like this. We have a very big group of people that are on Signal, and they have manuals that they have shared around. And the manuals are telling people how to harass and get around and trick and piss off and interfere with ICE. So whether they agree with what ICE is doing or not, they are interfering and they are obstructing justice, which is illegal. Okay. And these people are being paid in a lot of cases. It's very organized. So stuff like this is happening, where you have ICE officers getting beat up by protesters, getting attacked. And you see something like this, and imagine you're an ICE officer and someone starts walking towards you with an open carry gun, and you've already had experiences like this. I mean, it's just a really bad situation on both sides. And obviously,
we don't like to know if they did actually see that or not. I'm wondering if they saw him, because to me, like our crowd control protocols and whatnot, if we see somebody with a gun, we're going to address it. And I'm a Second Amendment guy too. I don't care. But again, that's going to be something that we'd pay attention to, is if somebody's got a gun and they're actively in the scene doing the things that guy was doing. If he was just carrying and was standing on the sidewalk, again, we're still going to mark that and be like, hey, just so you know, this guy here's got open carry. But he was actively like moving around in there. I was wondering if anybody even saw it. It'd be interesting to see when they come out with reports whether or not he was seen with the gun prior or not.
Well, I wanted to show this. So there's this thing going around right here. This is a PDF. It's on Cam Higbee. Basically, it's showing their manual. It shows them exactly how to do everything they shouldn't be doing. But I was like, okay, that's fine. But are they actually doing anything illegal? That was my question. So I went down, and someone else had already asked. They asked Grok. Based on reviewing the manual's content, there are 10 aspects that could be potential violate laws, right? tailing ICE vehicles and risking stalking charges. And as we know, they do dox the officers. That has happened. And then blowing whistles to warn of agents, that's aiding fugitives. Gathering crowds to film, potentially obstructing operations. We know they do that on purpose. They're obstructing operations everywhere. That's kind of their main point of being there. Identifying agents, that's doxing, invading privacy, physical presence to deter raids, risking interference, encrypted chats, which is Signal. That's what most of them are using. And I've also heard today that they're actually like politicians that are assisting and distributing this stuff and organizing these Signal chats, and they're in the Signal chats. So this goes much bigger than these two that unfortunately lost their lives. This is on a much bigger scale. And I think with the way things are going, this may continue. This might get worse. So that's really important to understand that this is something that's growing. And that's why a lot of people were saying that, they're talking about civil war and that kind of stuff, right? I think technically civil war is already happening. It's just not the traditional back in the day with muskets and, they're both walking toward each other in a field. It's happening financially, politically, socially, and then in some cases like this, in physical confrontations. I'm trying to find a video I can play.
I'll tell you this, there's definitely an information war that's happening in the Civil War space, where there's certainly people that are trying to gin up support for one side or another, and there are people that are trying to there's an awful lot of push to get people on the left that are already sort of incensed about what the operations are more emotional about it. And I see a lot of it. I watched 15 straight videos on my scroll last night on X, just scan through, and it's more and more, it's scream crying, it's using the word murder and executed and all this kind of stuff. And it's all emotional stuff without any sort of the information. And they did the same thing with Renee Good. And you don't hear a lot of time. And the problem is the political right's doing the same thing on the other side. And so I don't have to pick a side to look at these people and say the other side is saying FAFO and, we support law enforcement no matter what. It's like, well, either you support people having the right to do things that they can in America and that they can live and they should be able to be free and own a weapon system, and that shouldn't be a death sentence, that cops should basically play by the rules that they have to play by, that law enforcement is going to operate within their parameters. But what we've seen is the local authorities have really set up a really dangerous scenario in Minneapolis, because you're not seeing that same stuff happen down here where I live in Texas. Yeah. In Texas, you're going to see a TFO, task force officer on the federal side. They're going to coordinate some uniforms. They're going to coordinate some black and whites that are going to go out and block roads. They're going to go do what needs to be done, and no one's going to be the wiser. And everyone's in and out. And they're going to take people into custody when they need to. Or you can make it a big, political statement. You can have politicians get on the wrong side of it. You can have the local police chief go out there and virtue signal that he's standing with protesters and he's going to withdraw his guys while they're getting rocks and hail and stuff thrown at them. And all of that just shows weakness to people that want to see anarchy. There's plenty of people out there that benefit from the chaos. I mean, I used to cover the protest that happened down here in my little town. Austin, Texas is not that big, relatively speaking. And there's about, somewhere between 30 and 100, jerks that want to break stuff, and they don't care what the reason is. So they're going to go and they're going to throw trash cans in the street. They're going to knock over signs. They're going to take cones from a construction site and block off traffic because they're being a-holes. When they get confronted by the cops, they're going to do their thing. And so you're seeing all those sort of antisocial actors coming out here. And unlike normally where you would see a police force that would stomp down on it for the safety of the population, for the safety of the agents and so on, you don't have to agree with the ICE raids or anything they're doing. You don't have to have anything to do with it. You can just simply want your citizens not to find themselves in the middle of a dangerous federal operation. And we're not seeing that. And so it's very specific in where it's happening. If you guys notice, they started doing that in Portland. There was a shooting immediately. Portland is another non-compliant area. What you don't see is the places where the states and the locals can get along with the feds and get it done. Where they just go out there. It's like, hey, we need you for an hour. We're going to block traffic off at this hour between this thing. We're going to go and we're going to extract somebody, and then we're going to be out of your way. And we'll go process them. So this is a choice in some ways, and I think that's part of the Civil War you're talking about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than what we see, but there's definitely money exchanging hands, and there's definitely a lot of organization behind it. I think a lot of these people that are seeming like innocent protesters are much more extreme than they seem on the surface. But this picture here, this is supposedly supposed to show him going for, he's holding something or going for something. Some say it's his phone, and then someone else is saying that his firearm's behind him. We saw the other officer run off with one, but this is the moment that obviously they've drawn their guns and they're doing what they're doing. But I don't know if this necessarily shows anything. When I look at this, I don't see anything definitive. Do you guys see anything here?
I'd say it's too grainy for me to even pick up what any of that is. He's definitely got a hand down by the right. And I don't know if he's right-handed or not either. I haven't seen a holster on anybody yet. So again, that's kind of speculative as to what he's doing.
From what I've seen, that was where the holster was. It was a right hip holster, so like 3 o'clock. So again, this could be that furtive movement. Again, it can be an empty holster, and seeing somebody go for something that's an empty holster doesn't mean that you know what's going on. I mean, all this took place in just a very few short seconds, and it can be justified and still look completely awful, and it can still be completely tragic because the guy, it's a comedy of errors kind of thing where somebody disarmed him, and then the message didn't get placed. So that doesn't. What I want to know is if there was an ND, and I don't know the answer to this at all. I have absolutely no idea. But if somebody NDs, whether because the firearm malfunctioned or because they had their finger in the trigger and they pulled it because they had a sympathetic reaction, I don't know what sort of culpability you have for triggering, one of the other guys to shoot. You could even have the person doing the shooting find themselves justified according to a shooting review. But if someone else tapped off a round over there while they were on the way out, and that was the inciting event, I don't know what happens then. And I don't know that I've ever seen that happen or any scenario like that play out before. So
we've seen some scenarios where cops have used like a taser or thought they were going to use the taser instead, under stress, they were going to use the taser and they pull their gun out. We've had a couple of those. Trying to figure that one. It was a bus, like a rural transportation type guy that was on the ground and thought he was pulling his taser out and pulled his gun out. So, those sounds can sometimes cause that sympathetic reactions. And if that was the case, but if those guys felt like maybe he had his gun and the officer didn't know he took it, again, it could be a justified shooting. Again, even if he didn't have his gun, he didn't know it. But if that's what he felt at that time, again, that's what we look at. It's what the law looks at. They're not looking at, 20/20 vision hindsight, and you're going, okay, well, that guy just ran away with his gun. They should have known that. Well, you got to take all those other things into factor. Like those officers that are on the ground probably didn't know that he ran off with it if that was his gun. So there's a lot to look at there.
Yeah, and for people in the chat, we're just looking at what's available. We're not cherry picking. I'm looking at several different sources from different angles. And one thing that's really important too is like this guy, I saw someone else put he was a nurse in the ICU. Again, whatever he did in the past, in that moment, whatever he decided to do, whatever reason made him start to get in the way of whatever the officers were doing and stand up for this woman. And then he gets sprayed, then he touches an officer, and then he gets on the ground and looks like he might be reaching for his hip or something. I mean, everything he did in that moment, it doesn't matter what else he did in his life before that. All that matters is in that moment.
Certainly the officers or the agents that are dealing with him don't know that. They don't know his background. They don't know if he loves puppies or, if he makes an outstanding latte. I mean, they don't know anything about him. They just know that this guy is there physically and they're now in a struggle with him. So that's worth knowing too. And again, folks that are listening and watching, you guys can have any emotional reaction that you like, and it's not wrong. So it's not wrong to feel one way or another. It's not wrong to think that this is awful or you hate this for America and all the things that go along with that. Those are totally justifiable, but they are completely outside of what goes on when the use of force determination is made. The shooting review board is going to look very narrowly. Did this person make a reasonable decision based on the information that they had available to them at the time? And could another reasonable officer in that same scenario with the same amount of information make the same choice? That's all that comes down. So that gets people really riled up because this is not like you're looking at an instant replay. Was his foot in or out of bounds and whether or not you get to win the game or whether or not you get to keep possession of the ball and you get another shot at it. This is a split-second decision where we don't get the instant replay, and they decidedly have rejected the ability to review other outside footage and other things. The shooting review goes down directly to what they found out in Graham v. Connor, which means that an officer in that space is the one who has to make the call with no other special knowledge or, after the fact sort of benefits. And so that's what makes it really hard for people who are on social media, because you guys can Monday morning quarterback it all day long. We all can. We all have a feeling about what happened, but that's not something that this person that made the shot got. So that's what they're accountable for, what they knew and when they knew it.
And really what's tough about this one is you can't really tell. It's tough to tell like where that first shot broke from, whether it was here and it was an ND or whether it was an officer that was on the ground that already was struggling. Like it's kind of hard to see until they separate and you see the multiple shots.
No, this is the frame I was talking about where they show the slide movement. This is the best one I could find. And this person kind of tries to break it down. so you can see there.
Maybe. The problem is the problem is
you have compression in the video artifacts and all that kind of stuff is low resolution, but this is the people are saying was an indie by this specific person with this specific gun is saying that for a frame it looks like that slide is going back as though the gun shot. So I think that's the best video that we have of that.
You put it in the strong maybe category, but at the same time, it for people that get really riled up about this stuff, and there's certainly people that are going to get emotional. This one maybe even worse than the woman, because at least the car thing gave sort of there was a fight back and forth in my Twitter feed about whether or not she hit him with a car. Again, irrelevant, but that's what people started hinging on, whether or not there was a car hit and whether that made it okay or not. If you have real problems with what ICE is doing and why they're doing it, there's a place where that gets done, and it should be in Congress. You should be talking to your elected representatives. This is not a law enforcement thing. Those guys are required to carry out the job that they have. If you think they should be conscientious objectors, they probably aren't going to be, because they signed up to a job that's doing what they are told to do. That's what their agency is funded to do. It's the mandate charter of what their actual function is. So if you got an issue, it really comes down to whether or not you think Congress should be funding it and whether or not they should change the law or remove that agency. And that is not the fault of the guys out there doing the job, even though they should use discretion. And, I kind of, there are things that are illegal, immoral, or unethical, and they're not all the same thing. But what these guys are doing, carrying out the laws of the United States government and, fulfilling the mandate of the agency, you're misplaced anger if you have frustrations with them specifically for doing that, I think.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other things I'm not sure. Should I show them? I guess I'll show them. All right. So I want to talk about use of force, deadly use of force. And people, that's really the question with all this. The Renee Good, where they justified thinking that the vehicle was going to come at him and hit him. Was he justified when he got hit or pushed or grazed, whatever you think happened? Was he justified in that instance? With Alex Pretti, if he's on the ground and he has a gun that's visible and you have multiple officers doing different things, not synchronized, maybe not communicating, there's pepper spray and mace and stuff that had happened. And in the blur where they justified in shooting him, thinking that he had, his gunner was reaching for it, even if another officer already took it, there's so many different pieces. So a lot of it is opinion. And like Chris said, until we get official charges and statements from everyone, you're never going to really know. I think the important thing is, like, when this stuff is happening, you have to look at the bigger picture and let your emotions fly, let them do what they're going to do, and then go back and look at it again and read the stuff again more fresh, right? Like, you don't want to make decisions when you're emotional. So don't go on social media and start fighting other people and making this bigger and bigger and bigger, right? This is already out of control. It's the people who can keep a cool head. They're going to help hopefully turn this around. So let's look at questions. Going an hour and 45 minutes. You guys are awesome here. And for those that don't know, I just invited Kyle on today, and he jumped on today. It was like a very last minute thing. So we definitely appreciate Kyle jumping in with us. But let's go ahead and get to questions.
No pants on either.
No pants at all.
Just the booty shorts today.
That's shorts today. Yeah, mostly skies out, thighs out sort of thing.
Let's see. Sharon Tuckett, thanks for becoming a member. Veronica, thanks for becoming a member. Let's see. You appreciate my dedication. Thank you. Okay. As a former Marine that deployed to Iraq twice, I'm going to say, is ICE agents need to be held to a higher standard and need better training. I think we've covered that pretty much during the stream, but their training doesn't seem to be drastically different from a standard police officer from what I've seen, aside from the immigration stuff and some of the federal law. Would you guys agree with that, or is there something I'm missing there?
I'd say it depends on their unit too. Like they could have special units that have additional training on top of that. It's like I couldn't walk on to SWAT. I did a full year of training before I could even do my first entry. So you could have some of these guys that have had prior experience with some of this. Some of those units may have a little bit more riot control experience. I mean, like I said, some of the videos I can really tell the ones that are put together, and I see their tactics and how they're doing it. And there's some that it's like this one is very, very chaotic. But again, we don't have the whole story. It could have been a lot calmer 20 minutes prior to that. I'd like to see more of it before I go, hey, these guys weren't trained well. Well, I don't know. I don't know each individual, what they're going to look at. But guess what the courts are going to look at? every one of those officers trained experience. They're going to go through all of that. So again, I can't say across the board that they all need to have better training. Should they be held to a higher standard? Absolutely. But I don't know. I don't know these guys' training. You could have some guys in those units that have, 10, 20 years in. You could have some that are 2 or 3. And again, it's hard for us to speculate that these guys in this situation who had better training, who did not, because again, we don't know yet.
The only thing I do know is that local PD, generally speaking, provides that sort of crowd control and also traffic control. And since we're not seeing that, these guys are being thrust into roles that they're probably not most likely comfortable in or used to doing. That comes from the experience of, maybe 200 plus federal ops. They're all planned. They're all specific. And that's not a role. We would have perimeter guys, but we didn't have marked units doing the kind of the traffic block. And so my guess is that these guys are probably out of their comfort zone with this sort of crowd control, riot control thing. That's not really what ICE does. We saw that in 2020, by the way, too. It's like people got put into places where they didn't want to be, where they weren't supposed to be, and then people got hurt on both sides. So it all ends up in a much more negative outcome for the public.
What about this one here? Why don't they carry tasers? We don't know if they had tasers technically, but
some units do. So again, Border Patrol, some of those guys have they're more of a police-like function. The ICE guys are more targeted and they're more like long-term investigation function. So they're closer to what I used to do. It depends on the unit, depends on the officer or the agent, and those are not the same thing. As you pointed out at the beginning, officers are different than agents. The authorities are different. The role is different within the agency. Think of agents more like detective. The role of agent is actually criminal investigator underneath the federal charter. And then the other guys have a different sort of law enforcement function. So there may have been tasers on scene, but not on those guys. And so you don't get to go to war with the army that you want. You get to go with the guys you got right there. That you saw that tussle kick off. It was 8 seconds. It was like some lady, no idea why they pushed her. Some guy got involved in it as well, and then 6 seconds later he was shot.
And I didn't really see enough of the vest to see if somebody had a taser or not. And local law enforcement's kind of the same way. Like some departments will require you to carry a taser. I had one that said you didn't have to. We'll allow you to have it if you want, but you don't have to carry it. So it's going to depend on the department and the officers. I will tell you, tasers have about a 30 to 40% success rate. I used a taser 5 different times in my career. All 5 times it didn't work, but I had it work on me, and I've seen it work with other people. But it has to make those good connections. You're looking at Minnesota. What's the weather like there now? What's everybody wearing? Tasers are not effective against thick clothing. So to me, them using tasers in that environment, probably not going to be as effective as the OC is probably why they went to the OC. So they did try to use some sort of less lethal options. You did see those steps. However, do they need to take those steps if they have deadly force situation? That's not the way that works either. So
this question here for you guys. What would y'all have liked to learn more, or what other training would you like to have had more from your experience? Did you want to go first, Chris? Basically, what do you think was missing?
Yeah, I actually found a lot of the combatives type, well, we call it combatives in the military. So I had combatives experience. I had some martial arts, not as much as Chris, but I've spent time doing that. I know how to do some submission holds. Like I know how to handle myself on the ground and some BJJ. If you know what you're doing there and you're really good, you're going to take me down. If you don't, then I'll probably be able to get the upper hand. And what I found in the DOJ side of things, which is not identical, but our deadly force policy is almost word for word the same as DHS. So just for whatever that's worth. What we didn't do is submission. And some of the stuff, those holds are actually required. We had to let them go. So one of the things that I was taught in academy, which I always had a beef with, you get somebody into an arm bar where you're going to be able to take them. They would make you disengage from the arm bar, disengage from a lock, and then kick away from them, and then draw your weapon, and then request them to submit. And I don't like the idea that if you have control of a subject who is presenting themselves in some sort of dangerous manner, that you're going to now draw a weapon and try to create time and distance and then ask them to submit nicely after you just had to go through the work to get them into a controllable position. For whatever reason, that's the way they teach it on the FBI side of the coin. And I always had a problem with that. It always seemed weird, especially because the guys that are teaching the combatives that are in the academy, most of them are like black belts in BJJ. They've spent their whole life doing this kind of stuff. And then they're teaching this sort of like bastardized version of it that you can use on the street. And they don't want you to actually use the pure version of it where it's more effective. And when you get to the point where it is effective, then they want you to disengage and just draw a gun and hope that someone's going to take you seriously. So I don't think that's a great way for feds to operate. I have to imagine that there's some sort of finding that the attorney general has put out there that says these are the limits. Same way that you can only use carotid chokes in certain ways when I don't think a carotid choke, generally speaking, results in a fatality. I've had it practiced on me too many times, and I've seen too many guys just get conked out for a few seconds. It's a really nice window to be able to throw cuffs on somebody if you needed to do that, if they were fighting really hard. So they have these real aggressive rules that guys get in their head on, and if they haven't done a lot of use of force, and a lot of feds are not doing that. Most people are compliant, just for whatever it's worth. The 3 letters on my chest used to make people not want to play games. And I think that you're seeing people get ramped up in those areas like Minnesota. You're seeing them ramped up in the Portland and in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., where they think ICE means I can fight you. And that seems like a really bad idea for the agents. And I don't think that they're really set up to be able to handle that. I know I wouldn't have been set up for it.
And then, Chris, is there anything else that you would have done or like to have been different for your training?
I think I learned right away that your department, most departments are going to train you kind of to the bare minimum, which sucks. But it was really easy to figure out that as soon as I became an instructor in something, that was where I was getting more training. And it helped to bring that information to police academy young kids. And then the more you're training them, the more you're learning as well. So I feel like as soon as I started jumping into instructor roles, that was when I started going, okay, I can see where my department's lacking in, but that also pushed me into, as a supervisor, when I got to those positions, going, hey, we need to do more training in this. I was always pushing my guys for more training. I was the sergeant that I'd sign off on any training, as long as it looked like it was decent. Probably some of the big ones that I got towards the end of the career were more the mental health ones, body language, force science. Some of the more sciencey type ones were really good to go to, because that helped me learn a little bit more about suspect behaviors and, what to look for in certain things. And it does help you. It helps you to, besides the experience I had at that time, but also helped me to kind of understand a little bit where people were coming from and to be able to kind of maybe de-escalate and talk some things down. So I think having that piece is there, but a lot of it, and Kyle can probably agree with me on this or disagree with me on this. I'm betting he's probably going to agree. The more time you have, you get past that 5-year part where you're kind of a veteran a little bit there, you're going to start see those officers react better and different, because again, now they have those experiences and they've had more training. It's time in the business that is really going to make things better for any street cop, 100%, or federal guy.
And just age in general makes you, temper with wisdom. You've seen certain things. So, 5 years on the force means that you also have 5 years more in life. I started in the FBI when I was in my mid-30s. So I was a lot older than a lot of people around me. It takes a lot more to get me riled up. You're in your 20s, you're full of piss and vinegar. You might get somebody who's going to react with that shove. That may be something that, you get riled up because you're not going to be disrespected on the street. At this point, I've had people die on me. I've had people piss and crap on me. And at that point, it's once you've had all the things happen, whether they be your babies or some lady I was working on in an ambulance, it changes your kind of your opinion of what, your sense of self gets more developed, and it's more defined by what you're doing versus what somebody else is. So I agree with all that stuff. And there's a reason actually in the federal system, you guys saw the original pay scale starts at 5 or 7. It tops out at a 13. In the FBI specifically, you go from a 10 to a 13 in a period of exactly 5 years. So at the 5-year mark, you're considered full tenure in the job. And so there's something to that. You're 25% of the way through, a 20-year career, if that's where you're going to go. Yeah, you should be moving into kind of the power phase of knowing what's going on. If you're still 1-2 years in, there's still a lot of things that you haven't seen. Not that you're not capable. You just haven't seen it because you haven't been exposed to it. So totally agree with that one.
Let's see. Marty LaMartina, thanks for the super chat, and also thanks for moderating. This is his first time. Walking my dog one morning in a park. Then about 30 yards away, I hear 25 to 30 cops yelling commands. It was training. I almost had a heart attack.
We've had that happen before in trainings too. Yeah.
That's funny.
We used to, in all of our trainings, we had some signs that we would put up to say, hey, police training going on. And a lot of times we'd go, when we were practicing, we'd end up doing, empty houses and stuff. If we knew the realtors in the area, we'd go practice on some of those. We'd also try to go tell the neighbors, hey, just so you know, we're going to be doing some flashbangs and some other things, just so you're aware of what's going on. It's a little confusing to people when they see that happen. It's kind of funny from our perspective sometimes when you see people jump and they're like, whoa, what's going on? Hey, we're just training.
That's classic.
I don't give a damn. Thanks for the super. De-escalation training is critical, especially for veterans. Let's see, 25 tech could streamline vetting and centralized processing centers versus scattered enforcement with cutting dollars. Officers execute policy, not capital punishment. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we did a ton of CIT. We try to get every one of our officers CIT certified, and also at least gone through, some of the other de-escalation stuff that we could. I think it's super important. And I think, again, going back to when I was a rookie, I was much faster to go hands-on, where when I got a little bit older, I was to that point where I had a little bit more patience when I tactically could, when it made sense. I would rather try to talk somebody into handcuffs if I had that opportunity. So I think that's a huge thing that everybody needs to have, but they also need to understand the difference between when it's time to do that and when somebody's pushing that limit, to where you kind of go back to what some of the cops used to teach me was the ask, tell, make, and they only gave those 3 strikes. And I was like, that can be appropriate in some situations. But a lot of the times, if you get some of that de-escalation technique, it's gonna solve things for you. Less liability for you, less liability for your department. Those are one of the big things you kind of should look at when you look about your de-escalation training and whatnot for your officers.
And every department's mission is going to be totally different on this stuff. So I do agree that there's no such thing as, officers are not supposed to do capital punishment. I agree with that. I mean, that's simple stuff, and they do execute policy. But how your agency's mission is achieved by what you're doing. I mean, I used to call people and tell them, hey, I need you to turn yourself in sometimes, because it's way easier to do that if we're doing a long term and I know we've got an arrest warrant that's down, and they probably know too. Just tell them, hey, you ready to turn yourself in? I had a guy that was on the Indian reservation I worked on, and he bashed in some lady's face. And when I talked to him, he didn't want to turn himself in. It's like, fine, I'll just call you tomorrow. He would call me for a little while, and eventually he just said, hey, I'm not trying to run from you. Because I just told him, I was like, I'll just turn the marshals on you, man, if you want to hang out and see what happens next. Like, those guys love doing wild stuff. And, you tell people something bad's going to happen. They end up getting blazed, smoking a bunch of weed, and then turning themselves in. And that's okay with me. Like, I don't mind taking in some dude who wants to show me that his hands and not go violent. But that ask, tell, make mentality is still there, and it still needs to be a tool in the belt. That's the other thing. Some of these people are getting the exact wrong lessons, especially in that place like we're seeing in Minneapolis. All these videos I see, they learn the wrong lessons for the last 5 years. And so, Matt, you've been watching this stuff go down. You know that these people they think that they get unlimited strikes. They think they get unlimited mouthing off. They think they get unlimited, like, pushing and obstructing and putting hands on and potentially doing things that are right on the line, whether it be with a whistle, whether it be with a bullhorn, whether it be with something else that's, kinetic. So all these people are learning all the wrong lessons about what's okay. And the feds play a very different game than the local authorities and whatever, Minneapolis PD was doing. So we saw George Floyd riots kick off in Minneapolis. I don't think it's an accident that this stuff is happening here in the same way, and that they're looking to kick that off, because it's obviously a powder keg of people who learn the wrong lessons.
So, well, same leadership too, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly it. And I apologize. My voice is like, it sounds like I've been screaming all week because I was at SHOT Show, and apparently they just, it's just nonstop talking to people. So I've been doing this for like 5 days and burning out my voice.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's
I guess. Sorry, Matt. I was that last question. Like, if that's kind of pointing a little bit to that officers are trying to go out and do capital punishment. I think we've already touched on that too. Like, most cops aren't looking to go out and do that. Most cops are very concerned about policy. There's a very small percentage of cops that are bad, and usually they're ousted out pretty fast and they're found pretty quick.
Custodian, we have a super chat. Thank you. Can we get an example of a textbook vehicle interdiction? Isn't there a protocol for how to detain a vehicle? We kind of touched on that, but did you guys have anything else to add, basically, besides the fact that, like, yes, like, you do not want to stand in front of vehicles, and yes, you should approach in certain ways and that kind of stuff, but was there anything else you want to add, or should we just leave it at that?
I again, to me, it depends on the situation. If you're doing a felony stop with somebody and they're compliant, they're parked, there's ways you react to that. If you're doing an actual vehicle takedown, like we had actually planned some vehicle takedowns using armored vehicles, and then how we would maneuver and stop it. Like, there's lots of different ways of looking at that. Are you pitting it, or what do you do after a pit? Like, and again, it depends on the department. Some have policies where they're like, you have to do it this way. Others may do it somewhat similar, but a little bit different. You go down south and look at a lot of the officers back in the 90s and early 2000s in the southern states were just running up on every vehicle they pitted or got in a pursuit with, and you were seeing a lot of officers hurt, where we were kind of doing okay, we got them stopped, now let's stand off and call them out. So again, it depends on the department. I don't know if you can, if they're talking like specifically on the Good incident. Again, I think that was a developing thing that was it was mobile and it was moving. There was a lot of moving parts to that, and I don't know if they had any protocol to it. The approach to the door, we already kind of talked about that and where that officer ended up. So again, to me, it kind of depends on the department and again what's happening in that specific incident as to what they do for a vehicle interdiction.
How about generally speaking, you don't try to stop cars with bodies, you stop cars with cars, and it's way better to immobilize them while they're static than it is if they're in motion. You have the choice. So there's a couple things on there that, there's lots of different sort of TTPs that people said, as you said, whether it's a pin or a block or whatever else you're going to do. There's ways to make vehicles not be as dynamic and dangerous, but what they were doing, stopping it with a body is I don't think anybody's teaching that. It seems like he actually just got on the wrong side of it because his mission was something else. And if you're coming in late to the stream, the Renee Good thing, I think the officer that actually ended up doing the shooting was probably trying to categorize for an intelligence, gathering. This was, phone video. He wasn't trying to see if he could put his body between her egress route or something to that effect.
He also resigned, apparently.
Who did?
FBI agent in Minneapolis involved in Renee Good probe resigns.
Who are we looking at? See if you can find the name.
Tracy Mergen. Or wait, let's see. Supervisor. Yeah.
So acting supervisor, public corruption squad, Minneapolis. Okay. So Tracy would have been a GS-13 agent that was stepping in a supervisory role as a 14. So for whatever it's worth, that's just a regular agent who was asked to do the job of supervisor. I'll look into her more. If people want to know, it'll pop up in my coverage over the next week.
All right, awesome. And let's get back to Ricky. Thanks for the super chat. The sound you hear is his hand with the phone coming down on the hood of her car. It's not him being hit. He walked away unscathed. He did not. He apparently had internal bleeding, if that report is true, based on what came out in the news. So if he was unscathed, I don't know if internal bleeding would be the same thing as saying someone's unscathed.
A lot of people walk off from really serious injuries in the moment due to that sympathetic nervous dump. Getting hit by a car is a pretty aggressive moment for most people, and they're going to have a flush. So you've seen people walk off with a broken leg. You've seen people, break feet, been run over by a car and still been able to run. There's all kinds of things that would otherwise be debilitating that happen when you have an adrenal dump like that. It's not surprising to me that he could have been hit. Listen, it could also be BS. Let's be real. It could be total fluff and BS. It could be the feds putting out a messaging that's advantageous, but none of that has any bearing on whether or not the shooting was justified, hit or not hit, as we kind of covered. But don't just lean on the fact that he walked away from it or that he said something in the moment or he had an excited utterance there where he said something nasty about her. When people hit you with a car, you tend to say not nice things about them. That's been my experience personally. And, people who get thumped with vehicles or have like any sort of, significant injury, they've probably got a good couple minutes worth of wild moments before they sit down and really get to experience what that injury is.
And there's people that get shot multiple times that are going to die from the gun wounds that still come at you for a period of time afterwards. Many officers and military guys have attested to that. Mm-hmm. Someone said, did she have a gun? Not as far as we know. I don't think Renee Good had a gun. Let's see. Ivan is Ivan. Thanks for the super. Great conversation, Matt. Was it confirmed he was carrying a P320? Could there have been an ND? Yeah, so we talked about the ND. That's definitely a possibility. As far as the P320, the gun that they showed a picture of and the gun that we apparently see the guy running off with, which is an officer or an agent, one of the two, it appears to be a P320, yeah. And it looks like it's an AXG Legion. You saw him pull his gun out. We kind of covered that. I don't know if we can tell, right? I don't know if it's 100% definitive what happened yet. And I don't think from that footage we'll be able to tell because it's not close enough. It's too grainy when you zoom in. Yep. So mace makes it hard to breathe and leads to shallow aspirations. And some people who have asthma and other respiratory issues have died from getting sprayed by pepper spray and mace.
And my sheriff was actually allergic to not mace, but OC. Like if you sprayed him with OC, he had like a allergic reaction to it. So yeah, it affects your eyes, your tear ducts. It affects when it starts getting to your lungs. It's going to affect that. It burns the throat, and it's similar. Like OC works in a similar manner, but it's basically pepper extract, so it's got a different burning effect. Again, a little more chemical based.
So people are asking, how was he a threat? How was Alex a threat? Is there anything that you guys saw that would qualify as him being a threat to these officers?
I would say, again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. All I know is there was a shooting. I don't know who fired the first shot. We kind of talked about that. Was there an ND? I don't know if he was a threat or not. Like, he had a gun. He had a gun there. I don't know if his gun was taken away. And again, we can't see enough that's going on the ground that I go, was he a threat? Was he not? I can't answer that 100%. And I'm not going to speculate to it either.
I don't think anybody else can either, if they're being honest about it. That's the danger right now, is that people get monetized. They get recruited to go do mainstream media because they have a definitive answer to something that happened. Nobody wants to hear, like, we need to wait and see what happens. And that's the answer. That's what should have been said by the people who are in the law enforcement leadership, even though they're not doing that. And that's what should happen from the state side, and the people that are out there trying to drum up these protesters to get them more riled up. The answer is, there are scenarios that we can all see, and we discussed a bunch of them, where he could have been a threat 100%, or he could have been doing a motion that is commensurate with the threat. And it also could have been a mistake on the, it could have been a bad shoot. We don't know that for a fact one way or another. So
we'll find out if he's a threat when proper, court systems have gone through due process and we get to the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Stopping traffic in my Rasta hat. Nice name. Thanks for the super chat. You can't dox public officials. They work for us. They have no right to privacy. Oh, are you saying you can't, or you can dox? You're allowed to obstruct them at the risk of arrest, not death. So you're saying that you should get arrested and not killed if you're obstructing officers? Okay. I guess I'm not sure exactly. This is kind of confusing message, but I guess the gist is you're saying that the death was not justified. And I think a lot of people would agree that just in general, we don't want people to die in these situations.
And you're not allowed to obstruct officers. That's why we have laws against that in just about every state.
Let's see. Custodian, thanks for the super. How many CE credits did the agents on scene have? I don't know what CE credits is.
That's continuing education.
Oh,
I don't think.
Yeah, so unknown. I will tell you that
they'll look at the backgrounds. Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Yeah, in the federal system, there's quarterly legal training that we got in the bureau, and I think that ICE has very similar things. All the 1811s kind of have similar kind of experience with this. So every quarter we get down, we talk about new case law coming out of the Supreme Court, if it dictated the way that we did tactics or some sort of investigative stop or capabilities we had under the Fourth Amendment or whatever. They'd bring that up. So they would regularly get, probably a half day every quarter, so 4 times a year. And then individually, people get trained on their specific focus. If they're working on a specific type of, criminal threat, whatever, they do get training on that kind of stuff. It's usually on an ad hoc basis or as needed. I used to get a bunch of stuff on cold cases on the Indian res because it was relevant to what I did. If something popped up, we'd get it. So they're all going to get training on that. But whether CEs is usually the thing that's for like renewing a license. And so like my wife had CEs. She's a mental health counselor. She'd be required to do those. Doctors and paramedics. As a paramedic, I used to get CEs every year. CEs are not quite the same thing when you're a federal agent because there's no license to practice as being a federal agent. It's not quite the same thing as being a peace officer in states. So just as people are looking at it, that may not be the right term, but I think that probably covers what they were talking about.
All right. It says 3 handsome guys. Thank you, Mercuriana.
Oh,
I
shucks.
just take a shower today. It's probably the shorts Kyle's wearing. It's probably what you saw.
There's a vibe to it, I think. Right?
Believe it or not, he has a camera under his desk. You just have to hit the button. All you have to do is ask.
Yeah, subscribers only, obviously. Only mans.
Custodian also says, thanks, man, for your insights have been really helpful today. I think that's for you guys. Let's see, 6 weeks training for ICE agents. You keep saying that, but what does that entail? Do you know what kind of training these guys go through during their initial 6 or 7 weeks?
You said more than 6, didn't you? And was I missing that?
Yeah, it's like 27.
Before it was like 20 something.
Yeah, so almost all the federal academies are high teens and or low 20s, something like that effect. So everybody gets the same kind of stuff. Local law enforcement learns more about laws in the state they're actually enforcing or municipal code. So that's going to be different than federal. Federal experience is going to be shooting, tactics, whatever they are for your agency. They're a little different for everybody. We call them defensive tactics, or people, that's your use of force for subduing somebody. So you get some training on that, which is physical. And then your last thing is always going to be like a con law. And there's usually a couple of different rounds of that, legal 1, 2, and 3 kind of thing, where you're learning about constitutional law, because as a federal agent, you're not worried about what individual states are doing. You're worried about, broadly speaking, what's the Constitution say? What is the case law that's developed over the last 250 years or so? And then what is the specific legal statutes? What people will be probably surprised to learn is that most federal academies do not specifically teach violations of law, especially if you're in like ATF, DEA, FBI, the broad speaking agencies. They don't teach you specific statutes, because there's a million things you could enforce under 18 USC or 21 USC. So those are your drug laws and your major criminal threats. And like I learned 0 laws when I was working at the academy, which blew my mind. That's all done on the job. So that's going to be niche as they get out to the office. And these guys are dealing with a lot of Title VIII enforcement, which is the immigration stuff.
We have someone says adrenaline is a wonderful and dangerous thing. Yes, it is. This is a good one. Doxing is not illegal. A lot of people think it's illegal. It's not. Do you know anything about that specifically?
It depends on intent. I think it depends on how it comes down. And there are certain state statutes that can be applied. On the federal end, I don't believe that there's a federal statute against it. So I tend to agree with the public officials. I don't like this mask thing. I know that's going to be controversial for people in law enforcement, but I don't like law enforcement officers wearing a mask. I know why they're doing it. I understand why they're doing it. I don't much care for that. You take on a certain amount of risk. We got guys every single day that are going out and doing drug enforcement on cartels and bad guys and nasty gang members, and they're not wearing masks when they do it in the narc squads on the local side or the task forces. They don't wear a mask every day. There are certain situations when you might need to, when you have a UC that's involved with you and they're part of the takedown or something. But I don't like it. So I think people are seeing that, and they find it indicates that these guys are like maybe ashamed of what they're doing. I think that their instinct is that they want to protect their families, which is totally understandable. I think it also conveys this message of shame or not pride in what they're doing in their job. And I don't think that's not a great thing to put on them from the outside. Because, I've never met anybody who's more patriotic, by the way, than guys who work Border Patrol or ICE. A lot of them are Hispanic. They're first generation American. They're more proud of this country than most people could even stand to be. And having lived next to them and had them as neighbors and worked with task forces and so on, it's a rough spot that they're in right now, because there's some really ugly people that are trying to do some bad stuff to them. You could see the organizations are out there trying to incite, and they've decided to demonize a whole agency without knowing exactly. I mean, most people don't even know what ICE does on a daily basis. They have no idea what the investigations look like, what the targeting packages are, or why they're even targeting these folks.
Minnesota doesn't have laws about how protests are conducted. Peaceful protests are usually movements, not hostile standoffs. It seems like, so there's a difference between a protest where you're standing up for your rights or the rights of others and you're doing it peacefully and you're holding signs and that kind of stuff. That's totally different than if you come out with weapons and mace and horns and whistles and everything else, and you are there for a very specific agenda. That's two different things. William, thanks for that.
I'd like to see again in that last one what else was happening. Like, we don't know what they were doing in the Good case. We know they were blocking traffic and that they were following them for quite a while. So I don't know about what was happening in that previous one, if it was the same thing or they were just kind of all gathered in that area. So I don't know.
Well, and they also blow whistles to alert the criminals or whoever they're trying to go after as well. So that's obstruction of justice right there. And they're doing it as a group, like a big crowd of people. So a lot of the stuff they're doing on purpose, right? Like they're not innocent and they're not trying to be peaceful in most cases. They're doing everything they can to destroy the federal agents and what they're doing. And they're trying to be as annoying as possible. And you see in situations like who was it? Nick, I think it was Nick Shirley, and he had people threatening him and following him down the street until that sniper rifle lit him up. So there could be situations where people are getting taken out by these crowds and Antifa and stuff. We just haven't heard about it yet, or they don't know that they did it, right? So there are definitely some dangerous people in here. Mm-hmm. Just don't think that they're like people's grandma and grandpa and cousin walking down there with signs trying to get their word out. William, thanks for the large super chat. Thank you very much. Would you agree, without voice-activated mics for comms, there's a complete lack of CNC? The nurse was in the wrong carrying a gun.
What he's saying.
Yeah. The nurse was in the wrong carrying a gun while protesting, and obstructing is illegal even with a concealed carry permit. The optics with no uniform or discipline in ICE is bad. Any thoughts on that?
There's a lot to unpack there. I don't know what they were doing with radios and their comms. It's one of those things we don't see. Are they all in contact? Do they have people that are in charge that are, putting out orders? I don't know. They should. It's better when you have, good mics and good comms. That does help. When it comes to carrying a gun while protesting, and that's not illegal. Is it the smartest thing to do? I don't know. That's up to you. There's nothing that says you can, nothing that says you can't. In my mind, I go, if I'm going to go protest and be involved in things like this, now we're starting to get into, legalities of, okay, why can't I? There's nothing that says I can't. Again, you kind of go back down to morals. Is it the smartest thing? Is it what's going to keep me the safest and least liable is going there and standing on the side with my firearm and not doing anything at all? But the part that he decided to get involved and start getting in there, now you're talking, okay, that's a little bit dangerous. But again, not illegal or anything for him to carry it there. He didn't have it out. He wasn't displaying it and shaking it around at everybody. As far as I know, as far as we can tell, he had it on his person. Again, concealed or not, it wasn't against the law.
Did you have any thoughts on that, Kyle?
Yeah, I don't know what their mic situation is or what sort of radio comms they have. Push to talk works just fine most of the time, as long as you have somebody who knows how to use it and they've got people that are paying attention if they're used to doing it and they have access to them in their ears. But in a chaotic situation for 8 seconds, I don't know if a voice activated mic is going to change anything. You could have drones up in the air, you could have all the the C2 that you want, and having a whole command post there won't change whether or not someone's going to draw a gun and shoot in a scuffle that's going on for a period of like 8 or 9 seconds or something, especially if there's an ND that happens right behind you. So no telling on that one. End of the day, yeah, same thing. Carry a gun, don't carry a gun. I carry a gun everywhere I go. I also don't fight cops. So that's my choice to stay alive. I carry concealed because I don't think anyone needs to know about it. If someone's going to find out about my weapon system, it's because it's justifiable and necessary. And otherwise, no one's going to be the wiser. And I've carried guns on airplanes, and I've carried them all over the place as a federal agent. And I've been in all kinds of like shady crowds where people would have been not happy to find out what I did. And that's fine. They never found out because that's the way you conduct yourself. So a lot of times it's like those choose your own adventure books I used to read when I was a kid. You can make some bad choices. Some of them just end up at the bottom of the well, and some of them end up meet some neat fairy, and then you get the golden nugget or whatever the heck it is. Maybe you have a good outcome and maybe it works out for you. But generally speaking, especially right now with what we're seeing in Minnesota, these guys are amped up. I mean, they're under threat, no question about it, whether it be on the internet because of people putting their names out there, their families being threatened. But they're definitely getting organized folks that are coming out and harassing them in a targeted way to elicit response. 2 people have now gotten that response in a very negative way. And I think that there's probably an argument, at least one of them was likely really easily justifiable. This one looks a little bit more sketchy, but I don't know. It could just as easily be justifiable when we find out what the information is. But that's the heightened scenario that you're walking into. So if you want to carry a gun around to people who feel like they're under threat and under attack, then you're making a choice, whatever that choice is. And hopefully it's the one you chose with also the consequences thought out. I don't think I'd be hanging out in these protests. This doesn't look like a real fun thing to go do. If you want to protest, go stand outside of City Hall, go stand outside of your congressman's office, have a march, get a permit, do all the things that people can do, make your impact. Trying to disrupt a federal operation with an unknown illegal alien of unknown status and violence and unknown, capabilities, that seems like a really, really wild roll of the dice. And it's going to turn out negatively at least some of the time.
Well, you can ask Kyle Rittenhouse how he feels now about carrying a gun to where he went. Mm-hmm. And I'm betting his hindsight now is that he's wishing that wouldn't have happened. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the last part of that is. The optics with no uniform or discipline in ICE is bad.
It looks, people don't understand how this is the thing. You guys have never seen federal operations cataloged as often as this. I've been on all kinds of, I've been on SWAT hits with guys, every week I was a medic for our SWAT team. So they had SWAT medics, and then I was in the reserve unit out there watching them. And they all went in wearing fatigues, which I'm not a big fan of, especially the multicam. I always thought that was dumb. You want to wear like green or whatever, like a sheriff's department, or like a, blue or something. That's fine. But yeah, people expect there's a uniform. There's no federal uniform. There's no FBI uniform. There's no DEA uniform. There's no ATF uniform, generally speaking, outside of those special teams. So if you're looking for people to show up and be all coordinated in a certain thing, that's Border Patrol. That's different. ICE is a bunch of guys that might be doing low visibility surveillance, sitting in a car, drinking a cup of coffee, see their guy pop out and grab him. And that could be the entirety of the operation. It could be briefed. We're going to do surveillance to interdiction, and they may do that. These long-term sort of like protesters are following you. They've identified your cars. They're going to go out there and freak out and lose their minds about it. All that stuff is sort of different and new, and it's a new threat. So you guys are seeing for the first time, how feds operate, which is very, very different than local police. And it's not a uniformed organization. There's no rank. There's a lot of things that are different from a police department, which is why it's my personal beef, why the FBI director keeps saying, let good cops be cops. It's like, well, feds aren't cops. They might have been at one point in their life, but they're not when they're doing federal enforcement.
Someone said, let's see. Can you see Cam's video of the chat communications? Yeah, that's the signal stuff we were talking about earlier. And there's reasons why they need to wear masks. Yep. They need to protect their identities because they are getting hunted. That's one thing a lot of people don't talk about too is, a lot of these protesters and Antifa and these different groups, they're actively going after officers. And there's people calling for that. I was going to show the video, but it's echoing, so I couldn't show it. But
there's tons of it, though. It's all over the place on X.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people making a lot of threatening comments. And I think they're probably LARPers, to be fair. But
yeah.
And there are officers that are worried about those sort of things, like somebody coming and finding who. It's not hard. I mean, with the internet the way it is nowadays, you can find people pretty quick. And I don't blame them. I mean, when we wore masks, it was usually because it was freaking cold outside. I didn't like wearing a mask for the most part in SWAT because we ended up going gas, and you're not going to be putting a mask on, or it wasn't, any kind of mask with, putting on your gas mask. So, I mean, we wore them it was more for cold weather than anything else on our guys. But we did have guys that were undercover that would come out every once in a while, and they did that because they didn't want people to know basically who they were and if they were involved in the case. So there's some reasons. I get the back and forth, but then I go back and look, and half the Antifa guys all got masks on. I'm like, what's the difference? Yep. They're doing the same thing. They're hiding their identity.
Now, some of you are asking about this P320 thing. And like I said, this is alleged, right? So we're just showing an example, but this guy is the original one who was showing this issue. But basically he takes a screw and he puts it in a certain distance. I think it was like, a couple millimeters or something. So he's basically putting some pressure on this trigger, which is activating part of the sear. And what he would do is he would start playing with the slide. He would start squeezing it, manipulating it, and then he would get it to go off without having to actually pull the trigger. And he got like 1 million views on this video. And then what I did is I went and I tested about 17 other striker fired guns, and I could do the same thing, but not as easily. So I had to move the trigger slightly further back before I could manipulate it and get it to go off. And if you want to see that video, I can put it down in the comments, but it's inherent with striker fired guns. It's just the way they're built. I made every single one do it. Now, hammer fired guns, that's a whole different story. All right, let's see. Where are we at here? Why doesn't ICE go take down the illegal cartels running drugs in California? I think that's some of that's in process, isn't it? I mean,
are they not doing that?
Yeah, and that's not planes. Yeah, that's not specifically their charter. I mean, there's their immigration and customs enforcement, and the ERO, which is enforcement and removal operations. Those are very pointed. That's more like DEA territory, some FBI. There's obviously task force that do the same thing, HIDA and some others. So, yeah, there's people doing that stuff. Whether they'll ever be successful.
Oh, sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
No, finish.
We took down several. We had a pretty big foothold of the Sinaloa cartel where we were at in Colorado, and we took down lots of them. I mean, the funny thing is you take out one of their players, and 2 weeks later they bring another one in. So it's an ongoing fight. I kind of like the fight where it's going, where we're taking them more to them. I would say, why are we doing it in California? Why don't we do it in Mexico? But that's just me.
And then kind of similar lines. Why is ICE in Minnesota when there's 5 times more illegal immigrants in Texas, Florida, and California? As far as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but they're kind of going, they're hitting a location, right? They start like in Oregon, for example. They kind of take care of the area there, they move on to the next area, and they kind of get that. So they don't have enough officers to hit every area all at the same time.
That's partially it. The other piece of it is that there's a lot of cooperation at the state, local, and then other federal agencies in places like Texas or Alabama or Florida, take your pick. And so they are doing it there. They just don't need as big a footprint. You don't need 3,000 guys from ICE to come into Texas because FBI Texas from San Antonio and from Dallas, from Houston, and from El Paso. I think those are the only field offices, but that's a lot of field offices. All those people are willing to throw bodies at this problem. If you guys have seen like the big like FBI arrest numbers that they were touting, and they were really proud of themselves. A lot of those are just ICE arrests. They're not actually going after like quote unquote violent criminals that are random or FBI type cases. So they're getting force multipliers in places where the local law enforcement and the other federal agencies are friendly. So they don't have to surge 3,000 people to go in, because when they're surging those people, they're also doing crowd control. They're doing traffic control. They're doing all the other sort of perimeter control stuff that has to happen. That's the big difference. That's why people are getting outrageous. So they're actually bringing this on themselves. If the locals wanted to solve this problem, they could easily make this really easy. I mean, they could just go out there. They could assist where it needed to be done. They could still do their normal patrols and everything else. It's probably going to tie them up for an hour a day. These guys do early morning hits for whatever it's worth. Feds love doing, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. hits. They're done. They want to be done by 8 o'clock. So if they can do it, they will. And it won't take all day. And they'll pay the overtime, by the way. They'll pay the overtime for the guys that are on the other shifts. They'll pay for the department's overtime every time. So that's the other goofy thing about this. They're actually working against a lot of the things that I don't think it's on the regular patrol officers anywhere in Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, whatever. I don't think it's their fault at all. This is, as somebody said, it's it's suits, not boots.
And then we have this question here. How do citizens know ICE agents aren't IDF or other bad actors? Technically, could they be? Sure, but that's kind of more of like conspiracy theory area. You just kind of like they wear masks. You could throw anyone in there, right? They could be.
It's already a federal crime to impersonate a federal agent. So, if people are going to commit crimes, they're going to commit crimes. Sure, that's definitely a possibility. I don't think it's a probability when it comes down to that. There's not a lot of. It's actually pretty difficult to get even fake like placards made. If you try to go out there and get 3-letter placards from federal law enforcement, it is very difficult to get those things embroidered. And we went to go get them for our agencies or for our teams, and we wanted something specific. It's not easy to get someone to screen print it. They are very cautious about doing those things because it gets on the wrong side of impersonating, which there are federal statutes for.
Really, I think the easiest thing for people to do is, ask the officer their name and badge number. And most of the time you're going to get officers that are going to cooperate with you with that and tell you what their information is. Like our department was mandated to carry cards around so we could fill it out that said, hey, this is who I am. It was basically a contact card. And if you want to contact my bosses, there you go. Like most departments and most guys are going to answer that pretty quickly. Now, in the middle of an incident like that, are they going to? Probably not. But eventually they will.
Yeah, and for people's awareness too, if you guys are not familiar with it, badge number is not necessarily something in every department or every agency. In the FBI, we had credential numbers. My badge had a number, but I don't know what the hell it was, but I knew my cred number. So if you were looking for an identifier, that's what it would be. You can also ask for the number of the field office, and you could, call up there and say, hey, I'm dealing with these agents and this thing, especially if you're in like a low key situation where you're trying to validate who is this person, who am I talking to? Allow me to offer some free advice to the audience too. Like as you're listening, like if somebody from the federal agency is knocking your door, just politely ask for a card and close the door and don't talk to them, because it's not going to help you any. They're going to do their investigation. You're not going to get in a better spot because you did. But at the end of the day, field office, they all report to a field office. There's a phone number there. They might be working TDY. They've got a badge or they've got a credentials number. They do have an identifying number that they can give you, but you're going to get it by asking them nicely. You go in like some of these people do where you're demanding it. The feds don't have to give you anything for whatever it's worth. They just do not. The rules are very different because they don't serve any particular, locality. So feds do things a little differently. And when people start getting incensed, like what's your badge number? And they don't tell you, you're probably being a dick. That's probably on you. And more importantly, they don't have to tell you anything. So if you want something, ask nicely. And I think you'll find that you'll get it from them. You just, how you approach people goes a long way.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll match your energy. So if you become aggressive and uncooperative and that kind of stuff, that tends to escalate things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. I think we hit all the supers. Yep. All right, so what we'll do is that kind of wraps up what we're going to talk about today. I've hit all the questions on the supers that I can see. But I definitely appreciate you guys both being on, and definitely hit that like on the way out and subscribe. And make sure you check out Kyle Seraphin. Put his information up here one more time on social media. And he is on many platforms. So whatever your favorite platform is, go check him out. I think your main is X and Rumble. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're actually starting to match it on YouTube. For once, we're actually starting to grow. I think we were suppressed for a little while. Go figure.
I know how that goes.
Right.
I've been going through that here for a little bit.
Yep.
And then I thank both you guys for being here. Chris, thanks for jumping on. I know it was interesting timing and you're a busy man. And Kyle jumped on last minute. So I appreciate everyone being here, all the questions, the super chats, and everything else, and the love. And, again, with this kind of stuff, make sure you're trying to look at it with an open mind. If you go in with a preconceived notion of what you think is going on or what's happening, it's going to make it very difficult for you to see the truth. And there are cases where there is corruption. There are, bad agents, bad officers. There's government corruption. There are Antifa that are there to cause violence. There are people in the crowd that are there for, non-peaceful reasons. So just remember, there's all kinds of things that can happen. So don't jump to conclusions. Did you guys have any final thoughts? You want to go first, Kyle?
No, thanks for having me on last minute. I know someone just flagged me on X, so it was nice chatting with you guys, and I appreciate the insight too.
Chris, did you have any final thoughts?
Thanks for inviting me. Nice to meet you, Kyle. Hope to see you guys sometime soon. I would tell people, be smart, and it's okay. Again, we've talked about this throughout the show. Like, emotions come into things and can cause, agendas to kind of get pushed forward instead of facts. Wait for the facts to come out, let due process happen before we start calling people murderers online. It doesn't matter what side you're on. Like, this nation needs to come together a lot better. And I think a lot of it starts with presenting facts, not presenting opinions and feelings first. Like, wait for these things to get through the systems.
All right. And with that, we will see you on the next one.